The Board of Supervisors may, by motion, recess into executive session to receive legal advice from the board's attorney on items contained on this agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431.03, portions A, 3, and 4. Motion and action to call for an executive session to be held May 7th at 9 a.m. for discussion and consultation with legal counsel in accordance with the Arizona Revised Statutes 38-431.03, portions A, 3, and 4, to discuss items noticed on the agenda with an asterisk.
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Mr. Esplin, any items for litigation or demands?
Nothing to report, Chairman.
Thank you. Committee reports. We'll start down to my left. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Feds kind of surprised us Sunday with a proposed budget. Secure Rural Schools is not in the budget. There will be a hearing in Senate Energy on Tuesday where testifying will be going on trying to get Secure Rural Schools in. Now they're saying we have to find an offset for the money for Secure Rural Schools. And while it won't affect us this year, Coconino, all the other ones will not get their Secure Rural Schools money this year if it's not in there. And next year we'll be down from probably 3.6 to 2.6 million if it's not in. But right now they're still trying, but it doesn't look too good. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Supervisor Bishop.
Yes, last week I did attend the CSA meeting in Phoenix. Where you and Supervisor Moss were also in attendance, and then Supervisor Moss and I drove up to Flagstaff and attended the ADOT meeting where it was discussed about Kingman and the West Interchange proceedings, and it looks like it's being moved up a little bit. They may be beginning to do the drawings in 2019, and then it's projected to begin construction sometime around 2024. And then just a couple days ago, they had an ADOT meeting here in Kingman where they discussed I-40 safety improvements, and it was a request for public input, and they're still requesting input on what the citizens of this area for about a 20-mile span of I-40 would like to see as far as safety improvements.
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop. Supervisor Angus. Supervisor Moss.
Nothing this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a short report. Last Thursday evening, was in Beaver Dam area for a local town hall. A number of our different departments were in attendance, and I'd like to thank each and every one of those departments for their excellent job in presenting everything from Mojave County up there to those folks. It was very well received, and those folks really appreciated it, and our people did a magnificent job. County Administrator's report.
I have no report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Approval of the February 21st, 2017 Board Supervisor Workshop and April 3, 2017 regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carried. Before I get into the call of the public, I'd like to make sure that we have the person in the audience that had the hearing issue. Okay, thank you. Next, we have call of the public. Those wishing to address the board to call the public regarding matters not on the board agenda must fill out and submit to the clerk a call of the public request to speak form. They're located in the back of the room prior to the meeting. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to responding to criticisms, referral to staff, or placing a matter on a future agenda. Comments are restricted to items not on the regular agenda, with the exception of those that are on the consent agenda, and must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. I have several people wishing to speak this morning on call to the public. Mr. Brian Braithwaite. come on down if you will, please, Mr. Braithwaite. You'll give your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brian Braithwaite. I live at 11374 North Classical Drive, Kingman, Arizona, 86401. The problem that we're having is flooding caused by the county getting the water off Terry's Road. And they've moved everything so that it runs down Huntington and down Classical Drive. And what happens is every time it rains, we get flooded out. The water used to go south and across land and get spread out. Now it just gets channeled down the two roads. And I've tried to get people out to see the problem, and I tried to fix it myself, and I had to pay restitution for that. But if they could come out and take a look and put it back to where it used to be. What they've done is made it so that it all runs over to Huntington Road and then down Classical and washes us all out. And all I'd like to do is get the roads department out there to fix it.
Well, Mr. Braithwaite, we can certainly refer that to staff, the flood control, and to the road department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Robinson?
I'm Stephen Robinson, 3439 North Bowie Road in Golden Valley. Last Tuesday, the Board of Technical Registrations met in Phoenix to consider a complaint I'd filed against the county engineer regarding an engineered plan. After I spoke, giving the reason for the complaint, Mr. Hendricks said the following.
I can explain a little bit about the responsibility, but I don't need to do that for you. I do it for the benefit of Mr. Robinson, but I can't understand it for him. I can explain it to him. Mr. Robinson has actively opposed this project and has done everything he can to oppose the supervisor and the election process. And he's an acclaimed activist up in Mojave County. And he's actually done this because he dislikes me. But
There were several facts of which Mr. Hendricks either wasn't aware of or didn't acknowledge. First off, in November of 2015, before this road was ever presented to the Board of Supervisors, I mapped out a road all the way from exit 34 along Sacramento Road, Colorado Road, and Legend Ranch Road as a great thoroughfare from north to south in the valley. I thought it was a great idea. I just didn't think Legend Ranch was good at that time. Three other things that were brought out are four other points. One, the board said that it should have been submitted, or should have been signed, stamped, and sealed, which is why they're now investigating another gentleman for the road. Second, they said the work was not maintenance, but rather new construction. Third, since the work was not maintenance and was well over the $226,000, it should have gone out for bid. Finally, it said that while they did not discipline Mr. Hendricks for the work, they said he, as county engineer and administrator, was responsible for setting policy.
Mr. Robinson, I'm failing to see how this is
Well, that's what I'm
violated your
getting.
civil rights.
That's what I'm getting to next. Late last year, after I started the research on Legend Ranch Road, there was a letter that came to me from an anonymous source. I'll read the first few sentences. Mr. Robinson, I suggest you contact the Office of the Attorney General and file a complaint against the County Administrator, Mike Hendricks, for targeting you without cause. On August 1st, he requested security guards basically surveil my comings and going on county property. And then 2 weeks later, on August 15th, prior to the supervisors meeting, he approached a member of the county sheriff's office and put in the request again. city attorney, nobody can pull a report without probable cause, yet Mr. Hendricks had requested that. It was a violation of my civil rights. I respectfully request this board ask the attorney or the Attorney General's office to investigate this so it can be properly adjudicated. That is my request at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. We'll certainly look into this allegation.
Mr. Chairman, I believe I can, if there's any allegations, I can address those. What Mr. Robinson said about the State Board of Technical Registration on making findings, there was no findings made at the State Board of Technical Registration. All they did was open a investigation to find out if there's any wrongdoings. And there's specific rules and regulations regarding sealing plans. And obviously, Mr. Robinson was wrong. I don't have any questions of you. You could sit down, please. Obviously, Mr. Robinson was wrong about accusing me, and they found that there was no findings on that. Regarding asking law enforcement to look into certain issues, I didn't pull any reports at all on Mr. Robinson. However, I just want to make clear, if I have any knowledge of anybody doing anything illegally, and what was stated to me that was being done illegally was Mr. Robinson was driving in a county parking lot without a license, and that he had had his license revoked. I didn't know if he did or not, but if I'm made aware of any illegal activities, I have a right and an obligation to notify the sheriff's office of that, and that's what I did. What they did with it from there is up to them, but I fulfilled my obligation on notifying them of a potential illegal activity. The reason I was concerned about Mr. Robinson driving without a license is he could hit a vehicle, he could cause damage, he could get us into a lawsuit, and if I had personal knowledge of that, I could be responsible also. I hope that explains it for the board.
Certainly does. Thank you, Mr. Hendricks.
I would like to just take 30 seconds.
No,
respond.
you've had your
I'm
opportunity.
sure
Thank you.
that's right.
Next, we have presentation from for Mojave County's PSPRS, and elected officials' pension liabilities by Mr. Jared Smount. He is the Assistant Administrator. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some information with you. Hopefully, can answer any questions you have, and I'd be happy to stay after if you need me to. Three things I'm going to talk about today in my 15 minutes that have been allotted to me is pension reform implications that were passed last year. That better?
Yes.
The Hall case and its effects, and then what's on the horizon. Is that better? Thank you. So 2016 pension reform last year, what happened? Some of the major changes with pension reform was there's a new tier of members beginning July 1st, 2017. Allows them to choose between a defined benefit or a defined contribution plan, and the cost is split 50-50 between the employee and employer, which is different than what the plan is now. More importantly, it fixed a flawed benefit increase structure, which was done through Proposition 124, passed by the voters in May. Back then, previously, the permanent benefit increase was based on investment returns, and it siphoned away some of the returns to fund future benefit increases. Now, going forward, it's going to be a cost of living adjustment based on the Consumer Price Index. And this is one of the causes of the largest piece to the increased liabilities that you have seen coming up for July 1. Now, why is that? Why did pension reform cost us money? That's kind of counterintuitive, so let me explain that. It's all based on the assumptions that we have to have in place for when we project the costs in order to come up with the appropriate calculations. Before Prop 124, these permanent benefit increases were assumed a 2% compounding on each individual retiree. 2011 in Senate Bill 1609, the pension reform back then was designed to correct this problem, and as we know, the various lawsuits that have come since then have reinstated those. So if you look at the table here, those that retired before July 2011, and this is the first lawsuit, their PBI was reinstated, which then required us to have an assumption of a 2% compounding increase. After Prop 124, they are being brought down to a 1.75% increase. Those that retired after July 2011, their compounding increase was a 0.5% because 1609 was still in place at the time for them, which had a funding level requirement and tiered increases. They are being brought up to a 1.75% compounding increase assumption. However, we have the Hall case now that deals with this second group of members. So what's going on in the Hall case? Recent timeline of recent events in the Hall case. November 10th, the Supreme Court issued their opinion that 1609 basically needs to be reversed for all members of the system. That reverted the contribution rates back, and I believe Mojave County has done that. We need to reinstate the PBI calculation for those that were hired before July 20th, 2011. And then there are some unanswered questions that we had as a Board of Trustees, and what does this mean to all the other changes that we make going forward? We also questioned a little bit the logic that was in place for the opinion. So we filed a motion to reconsider, not to necessarily challenge or question the opinion, but just give us some more information on how to address changes that we make to the system going forward. What does this mean for the future? Not just for our plans, but also for, this could have implications for the Arizona State retirement system. That motion was denied. The mandate was issued on March 24th. The Board of Trustees rolled back the rates, and then our first hearing back at the Superior Court isn't until June 6th, where we will negotiate the remedies, the interest that was also, the Supreme Court also awarded, the method of paying back the contributions. So what would that have meant to the public safety plan? And I'm just focusing on public safety plan right now. For those who would have been, for those who were retired after July 2011, they would have gone to a 2% compounding increase also. And so then in comparison to the two assumptions, the Hall case, the Fields case, in comparison to pension reform, it would have been a little bit worse. So the savings, even though pension reform cost us a little bit of money, it would have been worse if we had not had that in place. So instead, we have this table. Instead of the 2%, we have the 1.75%. And here's the effects on the plans. So the Hall case would have increased future liabilities an estimated $1.2 billion. With pension reform, it only raised it about $725. Now, the reason they had to take it to the ballot was because it was a change to the Constitution, and they had to get the voters to approve that. So this roughly is about a $2 million savings to the Mojave County. And then corrections officers plan, they did not have their contribution rate increased in 2011, and so they were not affected by the return of the reversion of the contribution rate, but they are affected by the PBI. Their estimated increase because of this decision is about $450 million. Now, there's a bill sitting on the governor's desk that is reforming the corrections officers plan. I believe all of you are aware of that. Senate Bill 1442. Essentially, it is closing the corrections officers plan for everybody but the probation and surveillance officers going forward. Whoever is in the plan and joins the plan prior to June 30th will remain in the defined benefit plan. But it is closed after that, where all your detention officers will go into a defined contribution plan. And then they're also taking a similar proposition to the ballot, similar to Proposition 124, to change the PBI. They will, has a potential to save about $160 million system-wide, which is just roughly over $350,000 for Mojave County. With the elected officials plan, which I'll also get into a little bit later, there's nothing going on right now with the elected officials plan. And this ruling by the Supreme Court estimated to increase the liabilities $95 million system-wide. So what are the effects of the Hall, the Parker case? So the Hall case is an elected officials case, and the parallel case for public safety is the Parker case. Same facts, same circumstances, and we have already, back when the Parker case was stayed prior to the Hall case going to the Supreme Court, we agreed to implement the remedies of the Hall case with the Parker case. So they're all going to be remedied the same. The excess contributions that we've calculated that need to be returned back to the sheriffs and the elected officials are $453,000 and $752,000. And these are unaudited. I had my accounting people pull this together Friday for me. The retroactive PBIs, and that's with assuming a 5% interest, even though the interest rate has not been negotiated yet at the Superior Court. The retroactive PBIs are very, very minimal, immaterial. I believe there's only one individual that is actually entitled to receive it. And then for the public safety plan, it's approximately reduced the funding level of the sheriff's plan about 1.2%. And then on the elected officials, because it is a cost-sharing plan, meaning you are pooled with all the other employers in the state, it's a roughly 2.4% decrease in the funding level for elected. So what's on the horizon? Current pension legislation, our administrative bill. We have one of the things that the reform took away from the Board of Trustees last year was the ability to reset the amortization period for the unfunded liabilities. We had the ability to take it up to 30 years. If there was ever a chance, we decided to basically refinance and take it to 30 years. That was taken away. Our administrative bill puts it back to some degree, but now it's going to be, and it needs to be an employer decision done by formal resolution, whether it's the Board of Supervisors or the city council. If they decided they want to refinance, basically they're unfunded. They can do that by formal resolution and request of the Board of Trustees that it happen. Senate Bill 1063, Employer Risk Pool. This is for Tier 3 only for the new members beginning July 1st. All assets and liabilities will be pooled for employers with 250 or less members, so that includes your sheriffs. It does not change the local board structure. That is still being reviewed. The Board of Trustees has given that to the newly formed advisory committee. They will be continuing to review that this coming year. And then, as mentioned before, Senate Bill 1442, Corrections Officers Reform. I'd be happy to entertain any questions we have at this time, certainly afterwards too. If anybody has any questions as I'm going along, I'm open to them.
Supervisor Johnson,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long have you been with the organization now?
I have been the administrator about 2.5 years.
All right, so most of this won't pertain to you, but when you talk about we're saving money, we're not saving money. We promised these people this money. When they're hired, they didn't negotiate a contract with us or anything else. Most of them didn't even know what they would get if they lasted 20 years. So when we keep talking about we're trying to save money, we're trying to screw our people out of the money that we promised them we'd give them. I guess one of the biggest problems I have, and I guess another question, when the downturn hit and everybody kept getting paid at the retirement system, but the employees took a beating, what happened to all that land that they keep talking about that we had bought that was a bad deal? Do we still have that in our portfolio?
We do, and we are judiciously getting rid of it when it's appropriate. We don't fire sell things. We're a long-term investor, and we have been making we've been making some pretty good returns on these investments. And yes, it has hurt us a little bit. They were bad investments that turned out to be bad investments. I mean, what real estate hasn't since 2008 when things tanked. But we're holding on to them and developing them and hoping to get returns from them.
That's good, because that's what I was worried about, that somebody tried to fire sale them all out when
No.
obviously it's land, and at some point, hopefully we'll get our value back. I think we're going in the wrong direction. The idea that we're having two plans now, that we're offering somebody where you can get in the retirement system or you can't. Retirement systems are Ponzi schemes. If not everybody abides by it, it's going to fail. I don't, I think it's the wrong way to go. Obviously, our legislature knows more than we do, but one thing that bothers me is you've got the county sitting here and then the cities, who we get told that we owe, what, $30 million. We don't even have a seat at the table. We didn't make any of these decisions, We're representing the people out there, and it's a real burden on us for the half-baked ideas the legislature puts forward and comes out down. That's all I had, Mr. Chair. It just frustrates me that, we treat the employees that way, and then we come back and the taxpayers have to pick up something that should have been taken care of.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson.
Chairman Watson, Supervisor Johnson, understood. They don't always listen to us either.
I agree with Supervisor Buster. In fact, my husband and I were both in law enforcement. Our careers were made attractive because of the benefit that the county offered us. And my husband put in 36 years, and I don't think he's had an increase in his retirement as long as I can remember. It's probably been at least 10 years. And I just think, like Supervisor Johnson said, we were made a promise. That's why we went into public service, which paid a little more than minimum wage, because at the end of our careers, we had a pension we could fall back on. And I believe it's a promise, and it's very unfortunate this is happening, and I hate to see it on the back of hardworking people that struggled their entire life just to have a pension. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop. Supervisor Angus, questions? Nothing? Supervisor Moss?
I agree largely with what Supervisor Johnson has stated. My understanding is the debt, though, is between $37 and $39 million, not 30. So thank you.
I just have one comment, actually. We're currently facing our fiscal year next year for revenues and our expenses. And new this year is the pension liabilities that we know we're going to eventually have to be paying. So another time the legislature makes a decision based on some hypotheticals, I suppose. But here we are again. Mojave County will be paying for another state, I should probably be very careful in what I'm saying any further, but another state mistake. Having experienced already $16 million of state shared shifts in the last 8 years, now we're looking at a $37 million shortfall in our pension fund. So you can see that this is a very hot topic for us, and that's the only comment I really have this morning.
Mr. Chairman Watson, I understand, and try to be the guy that has to give the message.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hendricks.
And thank you very much for coming, and it's always my pleasure to see you. What I'm most concerned about, we're in the budget process. I believe there's a liability for those employees that retired between 2011 and present or something like that. Do we have an idea on when we will know what that cost to the counties will be and how soon we would need to pay that?
Mr. Hendricks, I believe you're talking about the return of the contributions?
That's correct.
Okay. June 6th, again, is the date that the two parties will get together and negotiate the interest amount. Not all the employers have even stopped rolling back the contribution rates. And we can do it on an individual employer by employer basis. But once they've stopped with the higher rate and interest has been decided and agreed upon, we administratively can act quickly where we will let the county know by individual employee, the contributions that will need to be returned to them, and also the interest that will be applied to that. It will be, IRS will not allow us to cut checks back to the employee or to the employer. So what we will do is we'll allow the employer to take credits against future payrolls. And so the employer will then, as soon as we let them know, they can get the money back to their employees as soon as they are able to do so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that that liability is considerable, and it would have to be paid back very, very quickly, even though there's a potential for it to have to be paid back very, very quickly, so that what I believe would be important to my board is to know that whatever's decided, would that necessarily need to be included in this budget process?
The purpose is that it be a net zero cash flow to the employers. And in so doing that and providing these credit memos, the money that's freed up from not having to pay payroll contributions for a period of time until you reach that amount frees up that cash to pay the employees back. Now, the dollar amount that is coming back, that there's been some misunderstandings out there that right now it's 4% for public safety, 6% for the elected officials. That does not need to be paid back immediately. The assets, when the law was changed in 2011, we called it a maintenance of effort provision, but what it does is the difference between what the rate was at that time, either 7% for the elected officials or 7.65 for the public safety, the difference between those original rates and what they moved to was not allowed to reduce the employer's contribution rate. And so in our projections, we factored out that difference. And so the employers have been paying more in the sense that as if the rate stayed at that level. What that did is it increased the funding status. Now this money that is going to be returned reduces the assets of the employers, which will then increase the unfunded liability, but that's then going to be spread out over right now 20 years. So you will need to pay it back in the form of the assets needed to be replenished, but it's over a longer period of time and it's not immediate. And
one more question, if I may. Since we're talking with PSPRS and EORP about $38 million, I believe for all practical purposes the county's share, is it subject to interest payments also? That was a question that was asked me.
Yes, anything that's paid out and projected in the future will have some form of interest tagged onto it.
And do you have a feel for what's reasonable, a reasonable time period for the county to budget for, to be able to pay that monies back? Is it 25 years? Is it 20 years? Is it 15 years?
Right now, so if we look at the unfunded liability similar to a mortgage, there's 20 years left on the mortgage, and that money is that's being paid back will be part of that 20-year mortgage.
So just for my board's information, the $800,000 figure that was thrown out to pay back PSPRS, I believe, was based on a 25-year payback, not a 20-year, and it probably didn't include a lot of interest fees. But thank you. Thanks for allowing me.
I do have one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
You brought up the payment back to the employees, which has always interested me, because we're going to give them quite a bit of money back that wasn't taxed before, correct?
Correct.
So now, but you're saying that possibly, are they going to tell us how we have to give them the money back? Because obviously, an employee's going to want all his money, but if we give it to him all at one time, then he's obviously going to lose it all to the IRS, which he doesn't want. So is it going to be an option where we can tell the employees, say, hey, we owe you $20,000, you can take it all now, or like you were mentioning, you can just take it as your contribution?
That will, Supervisor Johnson, that will be an employer decision on how they choose to work with the employees.
Okay,
It could be in a lump sum, it could be over a period of time. They could increase a deferred 457 deferral to avoid some of the taxes. They will not be FICA taxed on it, because it's already FICA taxed for
Right.
those who pay into Social Security. But it will be federally taxed. And then the interest payment will be taxed differently. It won't be taxed as wages. And we will be sending out communication very shortly here on how that's going to happen when we give the green light to go ahead.
okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair, too.
Mr. Dodd, proceed.
Thank you. So, this is another issue that, given this, what we just talked about, I should have brought my bulletproof vest. The board, if the question is asked, how do you come up with these numbers? I was talking to Ms. Lloyd here about the assumptions put into place. The payroll, there's a 4% payroll assumption. Your payroll doesn't grow that much. And it's not just salary increases, it's promotions, it's shifting in total payroll. We have to look at the experience of the system. Every 5 years, we look back and say, what happened in the past 5 years, so that we can set assumptions to project forward. Anybody dealing with finance understands that's what needs to be done. And so we just completed our 5-year experience study, which was the period ended June 30, 2016. And as you'll see here on the table, the different assumptions in place, for the most part, decrease the financial impact. People are leaving at a higher rate. The disabilities are lower. The lower retirements. The merit increases are lower. However, the one thing that is changing, which is good for us as people, unfortunately it's bad as a pension fund, is that we're living longer. So the mortality rates are lower, which was overall financial increase, and the net effect is a slight increase for the pension funds. However, we are doing very good in our investment returns. Last year, we did not get that much. 0.63 was our return. No one in the country reached their assumed investment return at that time. And our return was in the top quartile of our peers. This year, as of the end of February, we're over close to 9%, if not over it now. So that will dampen the effect a little bit. So if there's any consideration about changing the amortization period, there's some things to think about. Again, just like refinancing a mortgage over a longer period of time, there are pros and cons. Pros are your contribution rates could be lower in the beginning, and it frees up assets, but as rates may gradually increase before they begin to lower again, you're paying interest basically for the first 13 years. There are some employers that need this. There are some employers who want to take advantage of this. This is something that the county is going to need to discuss and work with us to decide whether this is something they want to do. But the total overall cost will be higher if you refinance to 30 years. So this table shows the effects of changing the amortization period. And with the change in the assumptions and the increased mortality, the middle column, the effects of the assumption changes, and again, this doesn't factor in our increased investment returns, just the assumed 7.4%. You have the June 30th numbers, and then you have the effect of this increase to the mortality, an estimated 3% increase in your contribution rate. Again, that will be dampened by our investment returns being better than assumed. But if you amortize that over 30 years instead of the 20, it'll decrease your rate about 5 percentage points. So the big question now is what's going on with the elected officials plan? Nothing. And that's been very frustrating to us. We have been blowing the horn since they closed it in 2014, telling the legislature setting the rate in stone in the statute is wrong. It shouldn't be done. We need to change it, and that is because that's a big problem. So the big problem is after the Hall case, after the assumption changes, the plans are going to run out of money in less than 10 years. And we have been telling that to them. We have been sharing that. We have been going to meetings such as this and making sure everybody else is aware of that. So the current situation, there's another lawsuit that was filed by Mr. Fields. We call it Fields Part 2. And he is basing it on another constitutional violation, which says that these pension funds need to be funded using actuarial sound practices. Locking a rate, contribution rate in is not actuarial sound, in my opinion. The courts will find whether that's true or not. We had the message we get from downtown is we will address it next year, we will address it next year. Whether they do or not, the court will do something. Our hope, obviously, is they allow for an adjusting rate, and they may take the PBI to the ballot again. That's following public safety and corrections officers. That is something that they're most likely going to look at. So most likely scenario, the 23.5% contribution rate right now is applied to all payroll of elected officials. So those that are continuing to stay in the plan, and then those that became an elected official after January 1st, 2014, they either go back to the Arizona State Retirement System if they have an account with ASRS, or they join a defined contribution plan. That 23.5% rate is applied to all of those payrolls, and each plan gets their proportionate share. And so if we follow that same logic, that rate post-haul was estimated to be about 53.7%. And I know in one of the county managers' meetings I attended, I think Mr. Hendricks was there, I gave different scenarios. It was just confusing, so I'm not going to confuse anybody with all those different scenarios. Us financial geeks can talk later if we want to, but my hope is that they continue to base it upon all of the 3 different payrolls. And when they finally get around to doing something, it's most likely going to be closer to 60%. Again, these are things that not very good policy. Any questions on elected officials plan before? There was a question that was brought up earlier about paying off elected officials' liability. You do not want to do that as a county. You are in a cost-sharing plan with the elected officials plan. If you do that, you're subsidizing everybody else. You do not have your own separate piece of elected officials plan like you do in the public safety plan. So you don't want to pay that off. Once the rate goes up, it will go up for everybody. Everybody's in the same boat, and so you will be in lockstep with them. If you're able to pay down your public safety plan, that would be wise. Your corrections officer's plan is over 100% funded, so you're fine there. You don't need to worry about that. But again, the elected officials, we don't recommend paying anything extra because you'll be subsidizing everybody else.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Johnson.
Have you calculated out with your death scenario here, what the state is going to owe, because this will all be with the elected officials. It's all going to be out of the state, because we have nobody new paying money into the elected officials' retirement. So at some point, there's no more contributions going in, and every retirement it's got to be paid by somebody. Is the state picking that all up, or is that going to be?
Well, that's why my proposal to the legislature that I actually wrote the legislation and gave them early in the session was to continue paying it based upon payroll, everybody's payroll. So right now you have, excuse me, 23.5% for those in the DC plan. 6% employer goes to the DC plan, and then the difference, 17.5, goes to the legacy plan. So the state is kicking in $5 million appropriations right now every year. They have also made it available. I believe the counties have always received a portion of court fees. That's now being made available to all the other cities, towns, and other employers in the system. The 60% estimate is based upon no additional money coming in from the state. The state may come up with additional money and say, okay, we'll move that 5 to 10 million. But as the contribution rate is based upon the payroll, so it's the number of people don't change. The number of elected officials don't change, and assuming their payrolls, the salaries, which are most of them are set by statute or rule, that payroll stays constant. And so that way, when all of you are ready to retire, you'll still be able to get your pension. And it is a contract. I don't think the state, no one can say, you know, okay, the money, the plan is running out of money. If it gets to that point, then it's a pay-as-you-go plan, meaning the pensions that get paid out, they pay the money to pay them. It's just a pass-through. It's no longer accumulating assets to invest and to project into the future. They are contracts. The courts have clarified that, or have made that very clear, that these are contracts, and these pensions are, you are entitled to them.
But I guess my question is the money obligation, who's going to pay it? Because already we have more people drawing retirement that are paying in. And at some point, all the rest of them will retire, and there'll be nobody paying in. The counties or anybody else will not be paying into that system because we've
Correct.
We've done away with that system. Do we know what that liability is going to be? Is that going to be a state liability, or will that be given back to the county?
It will continue to be the counties and the state and the cities. And again, it's based upon the payroll of those going into the DC plan or into the ESRS plan. There will be, let's say of the 60% rate, 10% goes to ASRS. 50% will go to fund the legacy plan. So that's where the monies will come from. And that will continue as long as we have elected officials.
Do we have any number, though, that says, I mean, this plan is set to, well, obviously it's not making money now, but when will it go bust? 5 years, 10 years?
About 10 years.
10 years?
Yes.
And then what would be the projected liability of?
Projected liability, I do not have that for you. I can't get that for you, though.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Johnson. Supervisor Bishop, anything further?
No.
Supervisor Angus? Supervisor Moss? Just want to make sure that I'm understanding you completely. You're suggesting that we do recognize the $20 million shortfall in the PRS. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're recommending that we don't recognize the shortfall of $18 million in the elected officials due to the 60% possibility of contributions.
My recommendation, if your question is to pay it down, pay it off, I would recommend do not pay off the elected officials shortfall, because you're all in the same boat together as elected officials around the state.
We're all in the same boat together, and I understand why you're saying not to pay it down. Would it be wise to set aside dollars for
Correct,
that
yes.
eventual liability coming true?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. You would be wise to set aside that money.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, that that liability is not going to go away, that we're going to be held to it at some point in time, And if we don't put those dollars back, starting this year, then we can look for one terrible assessment down the road. Well, thank you very much for enlightening and bringing happiness to this day.
Ironically, I love my job.
I'm glad you
I
do.
didn't create the problem, but I'm hopefully here to help correct it.
I'm sure it's very much of a challenge. We'd like to thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and on then to the consent agenda. The following items listed under the consent agenda will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion of said items unless a board member so requests. In that event, the item will be removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and action. Supervisor Johnson, do you have any items?
37, Mr. Chair.
37. Supervisor Bishop.
I have nothing.
Supervisor Angus.
23 and 27.
Supervisor Moss.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Chair will entertain a motion to,
I move that we approve the consent agenda accepting items 23, 27, and 37.
we have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda with the exception of item 23, 27, and 37. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carried. On to item 23. Supervisor Angus?
Thank you, Chairman Watson. This item is to authorize procurement of 2 vehicles to be operated and maintained by the Bioterrorism Division of Public Health for an amount not to exceed $75,000. And I just wanted a little explanation where that fund is. Is that a grant? And we need 2? Like, are these specially equipped, or? It was just kind of interesting for me.
Good morning, Chairman
morning.
Watson, members of the board. Supervisor Angus, yes, this is our emergency preparedness grant for public health that started after 9/11. Excuse me, and we have 2 trailers that we use when we respond to any kind of an emergency. We also use those in the field for immunization clinics, et cetera, and the vehicles we've had for pulling those are both really on their last leg. So we have grant funding that is available to us to replace those vehicles. And this is the way the state requires us to pay for those vehicles.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And with that, I'll have a motion to approve item 23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of item number 23. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 27.
Chairman Watson, this item is to approve the increase of the juvenile detention per diem fee from $256 to $324 per day per detainee. And is there anyone who can address this, answer a question?
This
Thank you, Ms.
is
Lloyd.
Josh Frisbee from the Juvenile Detention, and he and I both have worked together on this, so we should be able to address your question.
Thank you. It's a jump. And was there some kind of new statute or, unfunded mandate or something that made this go up?
The cause was really a decline in the number of days. So the number of juveniles per day declined significantly this past year. And there's some specific reasons why operationally the department could review that, but that is what it's based upon, are the number of days.
Well, that's kind of a good thing, right? So we have less people, less juveniles in the system.
If it were that wonderful, that would be great. Overall, do you want to address the?
I can address the issue of the average daily population, which I think figures into the calculation of the per diem rate. Over this last year, we have experienced significant staffing shortages, which caused us to have to self-impose some booking restrictions. That has affected our average daily population, which is reflected in the new per diem rate.
Okay. And staffing reasons for what? For what reason? Just hard to get, or?
Well, I think it's
'cause
probably
I
a
have never-
combination of factors. I'd be hard-pressed to give you facts, but I mean, on an anecdotal level, I would say that some of it probably has to do with salary. Some of it probably has to do with just regular turnover. But we've experienced it in not only juvenile detention this year, but also in adult and juvenile probation. Usually when we have a shortage of detention, we can draw from our probation staff to help cover shortages at detention. That's not been possible this year because we experienced shortages in all three areas.
Okay. I
So
see
as a
Judge
result,
Gertler
we had
is
to,
lurking back there.
I'm sorry, so we had to, again, put some limitations on the number of juveniles we were booking in.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. May it please the chairman, supervisors, administration, and council. Supervisor Angus, to address the issue, you brought up two different points. You know, the one point was the number of people that have been, or youth have been detained. Probation did have to, look at who we should be detaining when there has been an arrest made. And so there was that level of restriction that we did not want law enforcement to bring in a juvenile unless it was really necessary for the protection of the community. On the court side, there were a number of juvenile that we probably would have ordered and detained, but because of the restrictions with staff, many times instead we would place them on electronic home surveillance systems, put the ankle bracelets on them. And again, the reason for that was the staff shortages. We did have one individual that was out on FMLA, nothing we could do about that. But then we also incurred during that huge swing when we lost a ton of probation officers, we had lost 3 in detention. So we had to impose no PTO. We had supervisors that were, working the floor. We were bringing in other probation officers to work shifts. We even looked at bringing in people from Yavapai County from their detention center and pay them because our shortages were so bad. And that is the reason then that we had to look at limiting the bookings from law enforcement and limiting the court orders on who would be detained.
May I ask you something?
Yes.
What is the success of the ankle bracelets versus the detention?
I can't give you specifics as far as numbers are concerned. I can tell you that my experience, because I do handle a juvenile assignment in Bullhead City, is that yes, every once in a while we will have a juvenile that will cut the ankle bracelet off and take off, and inevitably they're picked up and they're put in detention. But it would seem to me that the vast majority of those that I've ordered onto the ankle bracelets comply, because most of them understand and know, especially if they're a second or third time offender, that this really is the end of the rope, and therefore it's commitment to the Department of Juvenile Corrections next. So we seem to have a fairly good success, or very high success rate with the ankle bracelets.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I have no questions. Any further questions from the?
Okay, with that, I'll make a motion to approve item 27.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 27. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 37, Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have really questions to the sheriff, but I understand what he's doing, and it looks good to me. I just wanted to bring up that maybe the staff could work with him, because I see he has $30,000 for overtime for litter or trash control, and we have a $390,000 budget for a race, and I think that should be picked up there, not through the sheriff. That was all I had.
Okay.
If I'd make a motion to approve it, I just wanted to.
Float it out there? I understand.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, that completes our consent agenda. We'll now go to public hearings. The item number 40, I'll open the public hearing for the discussion, possible action regarding the approval of the additional additional fee to the recorder's fee structure for an intergovernmental rate to create, process, and/or duplicate microfilm according to Arizona permanent record standards at a cost of $42 a roll. And we have Mrs. Blair here in attendance today, along with other folks. Ms. Blair, would you mind coming down and telling us why we're needing the increase?
Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Basically, one of the vendors that typically did this has gone out of business. So we just wanted to offer to other counties and government agencies, because we have a film lab to produce the microfilm, to just offer that to the cities and other counties in order to keep their businesses in going with their disaster recovery. So it was just something that, before we move forward on it, we wanted approval.
Okay. If I could, Robert, I believe you designed that system. Is this is a service that will be performing for other counties, is that correct?
Exactly. We've had some interest. Like Mrs. Blair said, a vendor went out of business. We have a lab. We've had a lab for years. We would assist and provide that service for them in case they needed it. So establishing a fee was priority.
Do you feel that this is an appropriate dollar amount for that fee?
Absolutely.
Do you feel comfortable with it? I feel comfortable with it.
I just have a quick question. I have a memory that we've done that, we've been doing that all along. I remember Carol Meyer coming up and explaining that we were doing it for other counties. Is this just an extension of it, offering it more? Is this just are we raising the fee, or what? So that's how much we've been charging all along?
No, this is a separate fee to other governmental agencies.
But are you doing it for other counties too? Have you up until now been doing it to other counties?
We had at one time done an IGA with Apache County. We were moving forward on it, and then they just put the brakes on that. And so this is, because that never happened, we had an analysis done, and this is, we haven't done it in the past. We've had some other, we do have other fees, but this is, the reason we're bringing it forward is because this would be a new fee. And this is just set up for, we had interest from other counties, cities, just to be able to offer that service. Whether they take up on us, we've had, the interest has been shown is why we're bringing it forward, but this would be considered a new fee.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 40? I have no one signed up for item number 40. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item number 40 before we close the public hearing? Public hearing is closed. Item number 40.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 40 of the agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second for the approval of item number 40. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 41A, Mr. Tim Walsh. I'll open the public hearing for item number 41A. Discussion, possible action regarding the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution number 2017-048 to rescind and cause the property to revert from a 2H Highway Commercial Zone to previous zone of agricultural residential for the failure to meet conditions of approval as specified in Board of Supervisors Resolution number 98-163, which approves the rezone of the assessor parcel originally. Mr. Walsh.
Chairman Watson, members of the board, this item here is related to the following two items. This was actually approved, as was mentioned, back in, 98, I believe, and the requirements set forth at that resolution were not met. The following two items, the property has since been separated, and one of the owners of one of those pieces of property is looking to move forward a rezone for that property. So in order to move on the next two items, basically this needs to be rescinded, and then we can move forward with those. But be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the clarification. Questions for Mr. Wall?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 41A? There being no one signed up and no one wishing to speak, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the rescinding and cause reversion from C2H zone to the previous zone of AR as called for in item 41A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the rescinding of the resolution. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Now we go on to item number 41B. Mr. Wall? We'll open the public hearing for item number 41B. The adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution 2017-049 to amend the Mojave County General Plan from the Neighborhood Commercial Land Use designation to General Commercial Land Use, and amend the Virgin River Communities Area Plan from Neighborhood Commercial Land Use designation to General Commercial Land Use designation, and for assessors parcel number 402-32-125 in the Beaver Dam vicinity, Arizona Strip area, north of Interstate 15 on the corner of Fleet Street and Anasazi Drive, Mojave County, Arizona. The commission recommended approval by unanimous vote. Mr. Walsh, can you fill us in any further?
I'd be happy to answer any questions. Basically, the applicant's looking to develop the property, put a travel plaza and gas station in the Beaver Dam area. This action would be an amendment to the general plan and an amendment to the Virgin Rivers Community Area Plan, which would then allow for the rezone.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 41B? I have no one signed up for 41B. I'll close the public hearing for 41B.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 41B.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of 41B. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 41C. I'll open the public hearing for the discussion, possible action, adoption of the board resolution number 2017-050 for rezone of assessors parcel number 402-32-125 from agricultural residential zone to commercial, highway commercial zone to allow for travel plaza and gas station in the Beaver Dam vicinity in the Arizona Strip, north of Interstate 15 on the corner of Fleet Street and Anasazi Drive. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 41C? Board need further clarification from Mr. Walsh? Anyone wishing to speak to item number 41C before I close the public hearing? Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 41C.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of 41C for the rezone. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 42, open the public hearing for the discussion and possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-051 for the denial of a rezone of assessor parcel number 120-14-093 from residential manufactured homes zone to a single-family, medium-density, multi-family, low-density zone to allow for a site-built home in the Lake Havasu City vicinity, east of London Bridge Road on the south side of Lake Drive, Mojave County, Arizona. The commission recommended denial by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 42? Anyone wishing to speak to item number 42? Close the public hearing for item number 42.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, it's a holdover. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 42 of the agenda.
And that would be for the denial?
Correct.
Rezone?
Correct.
We have a motion and a second by Supervisor Johnson for the denial. Anyone, any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 43A. Open the public hearing for the discussion, possible action regarding the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-052 for the amendment to the Mojave County General Plan from Rural Development Area Land Use Designation to Commercial Recreation Land Use Designation for Assessors Parcel Number 351-13-021 in the Dolan Springs vicinity, Mojave County General Area. It's on Normandy Road between Cactus Ridge and Monterey Avenue, west of Highway 93, Mojave County, Arizona. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 43A? Anyone wishing to speak to item 43A? There being no one wishing to speak, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 43A.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of item 43A. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 43B. I'll open the public hearing for the discussion, possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-053 for the rezone of assessor parcel number 351-13-021 from the agricultural residential 5-acre minimum lot size zone to commercial recreation zone to allow for an off-road track in the Dolan Springs vicinity, Mojave County General Area, on Normandy Road between Cactus Ridge Avenue and Monterey Avenue, west of US Highway 93, Mojave County, Arizona. This commission was recommended by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 43B? Anyone wishing to speak to item 43B? There being no one wishing to speak, we'll close the public hearing on 43B.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 43B of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the rezone. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 44. Open the public hearing for discussion, possible action for the adoption of the Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-054, rezone of assessors parcel 32604-011B from highway commercial zone to agricultural residential zone to allow for a single-family residential use in the Dolan Springs vicinity, Mojave County General area. That's east of Highway 93 on the north side of Pierce Ferry Road, Mojave County, Arizona. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 44? Anyone wishing to speak to item 44? There being none, close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion. Supervisor Johnson, second Supervisor Moss.
Discussion?
Discussion.
I received communication from a real estate person in the area that owns 2 commercial properties and manages 2 other commercial properties in this vicinity. He's very much opposed to changing the land use based on future commercial development in this particular area. So that was my discussion, and I would agree that most of the area in that particular area does appear to be going commercial, although along Pierce Ferry Road, there are some residential areas, so there's some discrepancy there.
Next to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
So I'll make a motion that we,
I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor,
okay.
and that was for the approval. Further discussion?
No?
May I ask Supervisor Bishop what her motion would be? So I don't know if I want to vote for this or not now.
I would make a motion to deny at this point.
Okay.
Okay, any further?
I guess the
Supervisor
the
Johnson.
question I would have would be, somebody sent you an email or something, did they go to the planning and zoning and testify? I mean,
No, they did not.
see, I have a problem if they just send something anonymously, we have nothing on record to deny somebody that went through the system. That'd just be mine.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion?
Now I want to ask Supervisor Bishop, would you want to table this for a couple weeks to find out more? Is it something you feel strongly about in your area?
That would be nice, to give the property owners in the area a chance to become more aware of this and speak if they would like to before it gets approved.
There's a motion.
Yeah, we currently have a motion and a second on the floor. There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those against?
Aye.
Okay, that's 3-2 for,
Oh, I voted against, I'm sorry. I sub-vocalized. I'd make a motion that we table this item for a period of, until the next meeting,
We'd have to continue it, Mr. Chairman.
to continue it until the next meeting.
okay. Was that a second, Supervisor Johnson?
No.
I'll
Oh, yeah, sure, I'll second it.
Okay. Motion
To continue it till the next
continue,
meeting.
seconded by Supervisor Johnson. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried. That will be continued to the next
Thank you.
meeting. On to item number 45A. Open the public hearing for the discussion of possible action on the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution number 2017-055 for the amendment to the Mojave County General Plan from low-density residential land use designation to light industrial land use designation for the assessors parcel number 324-10-058A in the Kingman vicinity, east of Stockton Hill Road, north of Gordon, in Mojave County areas. The commission recommended approval by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to 45A? I have 2 signed up, I believe.
Good morning, Chairman Watson and supervisors. My name is Wayne Smith, and I was responsible for going around with a petition and getting people to sign up to, they did not approve of the rezoning of this property. They would rather keep it AR. And one of the commissioners asked the question during the planning and zoning meeting, what percentage of the people I had sign the petition, and there was 15 altogether now. You should have a copy of all of them. And what percentage of them fell in the area? And planning and zoning people said 16%.
I'm sorry, how many?
16%. And I said, well, that can't be. And it wasn't. They made a mistake. There's, on my paper, I show 7 people that live in the area, and they sent 15 letters out. So that comes, I did call planning, and I spoke to a gentleman there, and he told me, yes, they did make a mistake. You had the criteria to planning and zoning or the commission to vote it down. But they approved it unanimously, but they did ask a lot of questions about it. And they asked me, what would I approve? If they approved it, what would I recommend they do? And I said an 8-foot fence with slats. And I also would like it to revert back to AR if the property was ever sold. Now, I didn't say that in the meeting, but I'm saying it now. I was so nervous, and I'm so nervous now I can't hardly speak, but
Don't relax.
anyways, I would, all of our neighbors, I've talked to them since, and they still disapprove of any more light industrial, commercial building on the back side of their homes. They would rather it stay as AR. And so that's why I'm here. I'm still speaking out against it. So,
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Chairman,
thank you.
to make a point of clarification.
Certainly, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Smith, I believe, are you talking about 45B on the agenda as opposed to 45A? I don't know if you can see that, but I believe you want to, you're opposed to changing it from AR to CMO, right?
Yes.
And I think right now we're on agenda item 45A.
Well, they're linked, they're both the same.
They're both the same thing?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand, the whole board is aware of that.
Yeah, they're both 45A and B are the same property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Excuse me, can we also get your address for the record, please?
My name is Wayne Smith. My address is 4245 North Shadow Road. And I'm, like I said, I'm representing my mother, Judy Smith, and the rest of the neighbors, Mr. York, and he happens to be right here. The property butts up right against his. And like I said, there's 7 people that signed that are in the zone. So that comes out to way over 16% out of 15.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dennis and Christine Van Fleet. Please state your name and address for the record.
Christine Van Vliet. Our residential address is 850 Riata Valley, Kingman, Arizona. The business address is 4050 Stockton Hill Road. We are the owners of Arizona Northwest RV and Marine on Stockton Hill Road, which is right in front of this property. This property, do we have the thing here where we can show a picture, or can we not do that?
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the property behind our RV lot. Part of that was taken by the city. for the water improvement project, where the runoff goes from Stockton Hill Road through the parcel next to us and then around and behind the parcels there on Sierra. When they took that property, they did build up the lot there, and this was not purchased recently for this kind of expansion. It was purchased in 1998, which was 19 years ago. We've been in business on Stockton Hill Road since 1984 for the last 34 years. We are a small business, and we do need the support of the community. We bring needed services and jobs, tax revenue, and increase to the tax base for members of the community. When they did this water project, the city gave everyone a 4-foot fence. We then elected to put up a 6-foot fence, and it is currently around 3 sides of that property. The one side would have to have the fence added. And as you can see, the property that is, the residential property that is directly behind this lot has a 6-foot block fence and the trees there for the view obstruction. The lot that Mr. Smith is speaking of is the next lot over. They also have a 4-foot masonry fence. And then the water project serves as a buffer to the light industrial zoning, as is stated in zoning ordinance section 16.370, where a masonry and view obstructing wall is not required. The commercial property that you see 2 lots down, I believe, is a roofing company. They do have a fence, but they do not have any view obstruction on the back on the residential side, only on the other 3 sides. And their storage is pallets and parts and individual items. Our storage would be more display and overrun for the RVs, so they would not be just open lot storage set on the property. It would be the units there that are on wheels, the overrun where we can drive. You can see the road there is not improved, just the cement from the water improvement area. So where the RV lot is, we don't even drive down that dirt road. We would just go directly across and into the other lot. So we're requesting approval of this item, and we would also like to stay with the 6-foot fence versus the 8-foot fence that the other commercial property has, and it is not going to be the pallets and what you would think is open lot storage. It would be an expansion of our current business and the open display.
I would like to make just one sentence here.
Certainly.
It seems that every time I do anything on that property, I get a rebuttal from the same people. When I had a horse there, they wanted it out of there. That's agriculture. So finally, I started parking the semi-trailer and keeping my hay there and moved my horse. We have built that lot up with the city's help. It is all granulated gravel, dust-free basically. I've got the back half to completely put down pea gravel. I keep it that way, and it's been kept that way since the improvements made by the flood control. His main objective seems to be that semi-trailer that I've had parked there. That's going to leave anyway. That's a hay trailer, but every time I put anything on that property, whether agriculture or other, I get objections. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
I'd also like to say that he is speaking for his mother because he lives on Sierra, but he lives on the 4200 end, which is at Northern Avenue. He does not have a property right there within the 300 feet. The signatures that were on the petition that were within the 300-foot radius were the 16%.
Thank you. Just before you leave,
Yes, sir.
could you bring your picture back up? I want to make sure that location of the proposed 8-foot wall would be. I realize that that's 45B, but it does answer this question also.
I'm sorry.
If you could put the picture back up of the property so we can see where the proposed 8-foot tall view obstructing fence would be located?
It was to be on the back of the property where it abuts to the residential areas.
This is an 8-foot, or 6-foot fence around the whole perimeter except the side, but we haven't fenced yet.
Right?
The city originally was putting in a 4-foot fence. I upgraded that to a 6 and paid the contractor extra. Because when they put in the backfill from using their drainage ditch there, they asked to use the property, they backfilled up to the top of their concrete on that ditch system. And this is basically level from the ditch system all the way back. These other properties drop back down and they have a stem wall sticking up 4 feet. The property over here where he is complaining about his mother lives and she has obstructed view, she has the same problem with the other direction from this commercial building.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure that the 8-foot wall in reference is to the portion of that area that's a little bit green prior to the confluence of the water duct?
The green parcel is not our lot. Our lot is just the light colored one.
Okay,
Okay, and so where the little row of trees are, they want an 8-foot fence there.
Where it abuts to the residential area, but there is the natural buffer with that water
right.
Retention ditch.
retention, and the residential area right in back has a 6-foot wall and the trees already there for the view obstruction.
I'll add one thing, this commercial building here overran into the other property without authorization years ago, and I've worked hard, and I've got them to clean it back up. We had derelicts there, we had pallets, we had debris, and we've got that worked out where they're out of the way. They have since moved everything back inside of their compound. That lot there is still agricultural. When we worked this out originally with the city, they said this was all going to be a light commercial area. But due to all the construction of this flood control and all of our flooding, we're still getting flooding. That lot will not get flooding. It comes through our lot here and diverts down the ditch. Before, it would have went across that lot and into these other people's homes.
Right, I understand that. One more question.
Excuse me, Chairman. Can we ask that you speak into the microphone when you answer, please? We can't hear it very well.
Excuse me.
Just have one more question. It's been proposed that requirement of an 8-foot tall view obscuring fence would be constructed prior to establishing if it were approved. And how expensive do you suppose that would be?
Very expensive. You'd have to tear out the existing fence. On the back side of that, by the flood control, there's about a 6-foot buffer from where the fence is back to that, which a lot of weeds and stuff and debris grow there. That drops down about 1 foot below what my ground level is. So that would have to come out and then put footings all around and do a block fence. An 8-foot fence standing in the wind conditions we have in Kingman eventually blows those over and they start leaning. If you do it out of chain link. It would have to be heavy metal to do it. We don't feel that it's necessary with those tree buffers there, and they're also about 25 feet from the property because it's got to go clear across the wash.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
That clarifies in my mind.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Watson, I have a question.
Supervisor Bishop?
On the commercial building that's next to the vacant lot, how long has that been there?
How long has the commercial building for the roofing?
It's been there probably 14 years.
Okay, and then right next to it, I believe, is the fire department, is that correct?
That's correct.
We actually had that lot to do this years and years ago, but then we ended up with the flood control problem, the city buying out our property. Then they wanted all the property. We renegotiated. Been in litigation for years over that property just to keep it. And our intention was for overrun display of RVs. Right now, we're very full. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, not for these people, but I don't believe we have the authority to go 8 foot. It requires somebody, because it's a structural wall that has to be built, and I don't think we have the authority. to
Right,
do
I
that.
think the only authority we have is view obscuring.
Yes.
Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 45A?
Yeah, Wayne Smith,
Mr.
4245
Smith, you've
North
already
Shadow.
spoken to once on item 45A.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to say that some of the information was not correct. Yeah, the fire station is down on the far end, and then Kevin Ott owns the 2 next lots, already zoned commercial, with a metal building. And that, the 8-foot fence was the commission's idea to go 8-foot view obstructing, and I agreed to that. I didn't intend for the man to have to build a block fence. And I didn't know that he was gonna be moving the semi-trailer that's been parked there for years, that everybody in the world can see. So, anyways.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone? Mr. Walsh?
Chairman Watson, if I may, just a point of clarification. As it relates to the amendment to the general plan, we cannot put that condition of the viewer obscuring, viewer obscuring fence on that. That would actually be a part of the zoning, the rezone. the
Right, that
next
would be
item,
45B.
Correct.
Correct.
So, but the board does have the ability to require that 8-foot fence on the zoning portion.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, of Mr. Walsh now that he wants to
Supervisor
jump in. I've never heard of us putting an 8-foot fence requirement on these before. Can you tell me how many we've done, or is this something we do commonly?
I'm going to lean on my planning and zoning manager to help me answer that question, if I may.
Ms. Ballard. Because now where you're going from a 6-foot, people can put chain link fence up, and we've had those with viewer obscuring, but when you go to 8-foot, I don't even think you can put a chain link fence up at 8 foot. You're going to have to go block wall, like the man said. Now you're talking a structurally engineered wall. So how many have we done in the past?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johnson, members of the board, I do not recall the board requiring an 8-foot fence, at least not in recent memory. Our ordinance says that to view obscure storage, a fence will be 6 to 8 feet, but 2 feet over items stored. It does accept out manufactured homes, RVs, the trailer part of a tractor trailer, et cetera.
Thank you. That's the only question I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak to item number 45A? Being no one else wishing to speak, we'll close the public hearing on 45A.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 45A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of item number 45A. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor of the approval of 45A signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Item number 45B. Open the public hearing for 45B, discussion, possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-056 for the rezone of Assessor's Parcel Number 324-10-058A from an AR agricultural residential zone to a commercial manufactured open lot storage zone to allow for open lot storage in the vicinity of the East Kingman Stockton Hill Road area north of Gordon Drive, Mojave County, Arizona. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval and requirement of an 8-foot tall view obscuring fence constructed prior to the establishment of use by unanimous vote. We have several people signed up to speak to 45B. Mr. Wayne Smith, like to speak again? Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Van Fleet, would you care to speak? I have no questions. Does anyone on the board have questions?
I have a question. Did you folks agree to this 8-foot fence? No?
When we were in front of the planning and zoning, the questioning went back and forth, and it was brought up that his mother, we were obscuring her view of the mountains, but I think if we put up an 8-foot fence there, it's only going to more obstruct the view because we're already 4 feet higher than all of the other lots, so that would be 12 feet high. We also have a problem there with the graffiti that is in the overflow water area there and the homeless that live there. And so I think the 8-foot fence is just making more problems for that area.
Thank you, Ms. Van Fleet. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I have one question. I just wanted to confirm that that really tall hay trailer is not part of this.
No, it was there
Plan for the
for
storage area.
agricultural. We did have a horse in there, and he had hay stored in there, but it is going to be moved. It would be used for the RVs and motorhomes from the RV lot.
Thank you, Ms. Van Fleet. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 45B?
I have a question for Mr. Smith.
Yes, ma'am.
I was in your neighborhood yesterday, and that trailer did stand above all the rest because of the buildup of the property, plus the big trailer. But now that you know that this hay trailer is going to be removed, are you still opposed to this being an open lot storage for RVs?
No, I agree that it'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
If they move the trailer. That was the problem, and also the noise when Canyon State Roofing had their business going there in the big metal building.
Yes.
To the south. They would come at all hours of the morning and be there late at night with their beep, 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 loading and unloading material, heavy trucks coming up and down the alley unloading material. And what the neighbors were basically interested in is what actually was going to be put there and if it was going to be kind of like a quiet area because of the noise level.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wishing to speak to item 45B? There being none, we'll close the public hearing for 45B.
Chairman Watson, I'll make a motion that we approve item 45B.
We have a motion for approval. I'll second the motion for approval.
Discussion?
Discussion?
I guess my problem
Supervisor
comes from that, I don't believe that we have the authority. I mean, it's in our records from what they say, but requiring somebody to build an 8-foot fence is just, that is very costly. And obviously, this whole land back there should be commercial. I mean, there's no other use for it possible. He's already built up 4 foot. There's a wash between it that the city's put in. I believe a 6 foot up obscuring fence would be fine, you know, even oleanders to be put in to be cut to 8 foot would be fine too, but I see no problem with going with a 6 foot. That's why I'll oppose the 8 foot requirement.
Actually, I don't think my motion included a view obscuring fence. That was the commission's recommendation, but not part of the
Right,
motion.
my second didn't include the fence.
So you're second for a 6 foot fence?
No, my second did not include the fence. I understood the motion to be without the fence
Right.
included. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Good.
On to 46A, open the public hearing for discussion, possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-057 for the denial of an amendment to the Mojave County General Plan from low-density residential land use designation to general commercial land use designation for Assessors Parcel Number 324-10-059A in the Kingman vicinity, east of Stockton Hill Road, north of Gordon Drive, Mojave County, Arizona. Commission recommended denial by unanimous vote. I have no one signed up to speak to item number 46A. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak to 46A? Anyone in the audience wishing to speak to 46A? There being none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, in light of some information in the packet which was less than clear, I would move that we continue, or we return item 46A to Planning and Zoning so that they can clarify the record and then return it to the board.
And I second that.
We have a motion and a second to return to Planning and Zoning for clarification. I'm sorry, I don't believe I closed the public hearing, did I? I'll close the public hearing.
And I'll renew my motion.
And I'll second it again.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried. Open the public hearing for 46B. That's the discussion, possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-58 for the denial of a rezone of Assessors Parcel Number 32410-059A from Agricultural Residential Zone C2 to General Commercial Zone to allow for a radio studio and tower in the Kingman vicinity, east of Stockton Hill Road, north of Gordon Drive, Kingman, Arizona. Commission recommended denial by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to 46B? Anyone wishing to speak to 46B? There being none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, for the same reason, I would move that we return item 46B to the Planning and Zoning Commission for clarification.
And I'll second it.
Very good. We have a motion and a second for taking to the Planning and Zoning Commission for further information. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 46C. Open the public hearing for discussion, possible action for the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2017-059 for the denial of a special use permit on Assessors Parcel Number 324-10-059A to allow for a 100-foot radio transmission tower in general commercial zone in the Kingman vicinity, east of Stockton Hill Road, north of Gordon Drive, Mojave County, Arizona. Commission recommended denial by unanimous vote. Anyone wishing to speak to item number 46C?
Yeah, my name's Wayne Smith, 4245 North Shadow Road. I just want to say thanks to the commission for recommending denial on this 100-foot radio antenna. I was responsible for collecting all the signatures on that too. And I'm real appreciative that the commission denied that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wishing to speak to item 46C? There being none, we'll close the public hearing on 46C.
Mr. Chairman, for the same reasons as 46A and B, for purposes of clarification, I recommend that I make a motion that we return this to the P&Z Commission.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second to return to planning and zoning for clarification. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 47, open the public hearing on the discussion, possible action for the adoption of Mojave County Ordinance 201701, amending Section 11A3, Part 1, amendment and deletions to technical codes. The International Residential Code, the Mojave County Ordinance number 2015-04, to increase the size of residential accessory structures without utilities allowed without a building permit from 120 square feet to 300 square feet. I have one person signed up for item number 47, Mr. Bruce Bollinger. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Bruce Bollinger, 3233 Black Rock Road, Kingman, Golden Valley, Arizona. I'm the area sales manager for Tough Sheds, which are sold through the Home Depots in the Home Depot stores here in Mojave County. I'm in favor of the question. Currently, Mojave County requires building permits on 120 square foot outside accessory buildings. City of Kingman, City of Lake Havasu City, and Clark County, that is Laughlin, all allow outbuildings up to 200 square feet. This proposal will simply allow structures such as pre-built buildings, prefab buildings, buildings on skids, as well as pole barns and accessory buildings to be legally used within the county. Many of these commercially built structures are built to standards similar to homes and garages. This also allows homeowners and ranchers to build structures that they need and want without utilities up to 300 square feet. And I simply encourage you to approve the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger.
Questions?
No, thank you for coming.
I do have a comment. This item is the culmination, it's like 5 sentences of a lot of work over the last year by P&Z, by Development Services, by supervisors, by the public. And I'm very happy today to be voting yes on this. I think it's time, and I just wanted to make that comment and thank the public for all their work.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Angus. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 47?
I'd just like to comment, and I agree with what Supervisor Angus said. Well, we've worked a long time on this. We've had a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, and I'm really proud to see this through fruition, and I will be voting yes on it as well.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak to item number 47? There being no one else wishing to speak, we'll close the public hearing on item number 47.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 47.
We have a motion for approval
Second.
and a second. Supervisor Angus, any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Now on to our regular agenda. Item number 48, discussion, possible action, designate the Public Works Department job classes of road maintenance worker senior, road maintenance worker specialist, sign technician senior, sign fabricator, traffic control technician, traffic control technical specialist, crew leader, and supervisor as hot jobs due to the ongoing intense difficulty in attracting and retaining qualified employees. And Fund Number 205, the Highway User Revenue Fund. Job classes, and further approve an increase to each job class range by 3 ranges immediately to give a 15% salary increase, which results in an annual personal expense increase to the Fund 205 of approximately $418,366. To establish the employees hired without and who attain an Arizona commercial driver's license at the expense of the county shall reimburse all requisite testing and examination fees if the employee voluntarily separates from Mojave County employment within 2 years of attaining an Arizona CDL. Mr. Letowski.
Good morning, Chairman Watson.
Good morning.
Members of the board. First and foremost, on behalf of the 75 field workers and field supervisory workers that this item pertains to, we greatly appreciate the board hearing this item. There are currently 84 authorized positions across field workers and field supervisory workers that deliver road maintenance and operations for Mojave County. In 2016, 36% of those positions turned over and involved persons leaving Mojave County. The resultant impact is an inefficient delivery of services, as well as ancillary costs associated with recruiting, as well as training new hires into those respective positions. I personally looked at our cities, our peer cities throughout Arizona, our peer counties, as well as a national scale as far as the wages that are being paid to the road maintenance worker series positions. I isolated a particular position, the road maintenance worker senior position, and looked at that particular job class and the actual positions that are being filled both at Arizona city level, above 10,000 population, as well as all of the Arizona counties for which data was available. I found with the 2017 data that Arizona cities and Arizona counties have for the like position, as well as the Department of Labor on the national scale. I looked at the wages that are being paid as of May 2016. May 2016 was the most recent data release. In fact, it was released on March 31st. It pertains to highway maintenance workers working in local government. And what I found was our road maintenance workers, our field, our workers are paid relevant to that position 16.5% below the actuals that our peer cities, counties, and at the national level are paid. And as a result, that's what precipitated this particular recommendation for 3 ranges at 15%, and for the board to duly consider such requests.
Thank you, Mr. Letowski. Any questions from the board? Comment? I've got one question, Mr. Letowski. We're talking essentially about the road crew department. Did you give any consideration to the other job functions that would be related to that, such as mechanics, or any of the ancillary that would be tied to that?
Chairman Watson, members of the board, I believe you're referring to construction equipment mechanics, also their automotive mechanics. This action does not particularly pertain to this to that group of employees. This action would only pertain at this point to the those field workers delivering road maintenance and operation services.
Right, and I understand that. My question was, have you entertained looking at at that section of your labor force also?
Chairman Watson, we, as part of putting this proposal forward, have also acknowledged that there may be other positions throughout my department as well as positions throughout the county that deserve a certain attention and the diligent research to identify where the wages align with respect to a peer category. So I have identified the road maintenance and operations workers as a separate business unit from those that are performing are very valuable and very much an essential part of our operations, equipment repair as well as automobile repair services. With that being a separate business unit, I certainly am open to looking at that with the respective division managers.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Any questions for Mr. Lukowski?
I have a question. Well, it's actually for Mike Hendricks. Why are we doing this now instead of as part of all the budget?
Mr. Hendricks?
I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Angus, one of the purposes, what I hope to be able to do is to be able to review these particular areas. And what I asked the board to allow me to have the authority to do is to identify areas where we're having difficulty providing services because of vacancies. Number two, those areas have to have sufficient funding, either through vacancy savings or through some other funding source such as HERF or grant funding or such to be able to accomplish what we're trying to do today. And I hope to be able to, doing a class comp study for the entire county is extremely difficult, and it would take probably a half a year to a year to do. What I hope to be able to do is throughout the year identify areas to where we have these hot jobs and we have these issues, and to try to do internal studies and to bring them forward as we find them and as we identify funding for them so that the board can make decisions on them. So what you're seeing before you today, outside the budget process, is that yes, Public Works has identified funding because of their vacancy savings in the area and is asking for roughly less than $500,000 to be able to bring what we believe their road department outside road maintenance workers, specialists, and supervisors need to be competitive with the rest of the markets. And we hope to be able to, not only in Steve's area, but to look at different areas throughout the county. And like I said, I hope the board affords me the latitude that throughout the year, without impacting our budget or our budget process, to bring these areas of concern forward for your consideration.
Again, like I think our last meeting, I thought we had already done that. I thought we had already given you the latitude to do that.
You did, and that's what we're doing today.
Right. So
Yes.
again, but I thought it would be brought as part of the whole budget process, but that's okay.
I have a question.
Supervisor Moss?
Are we referring to item 48 as being funded out of vacancy savings?
What, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Moss, I believe if, and excuse me if my numbers aren't correctly, over the last 3 years in Public Works, Steve Letowski has realized about $1.2 million in vacancy savings because of not being able to fill positions or people leaving or for whatever reason. So that's exactly the source of the funding that's being proposed here.
My
Correct,
follow-up
Steve?
Chairman Watson, Supervisor Moss, we've realized a substantial amount of vacancy savings, as County Administrator Hendricks pointed out, but there's also a very important point as well. This department, Public Works, really right-sized itself staffing-wise when we entered the economic downturn. HERF substantially reduced during that period, but it has since rebounded to pre-downturn levels. However, our personnel expenses have not ramped up nearly to the level. In fact, what we're seeing is about personnel expenses in our budget are just 25% less to revenue as they were prior to the economic downturn. So really what I'm here to represent is that we are very well positioned from a budget perspective, both today as well as moving forward into fiscal year 18 and beyond, to absorb what is approximately aggregate annual expense increase of about $418,000.
So if I translate all that, the answer would be yes, this is
Yes.
being funded out of vacancy savings?
That-
Okay.
yes.
My net follow-up then is if we're funding these out of vacancy savings, are those vacancies still open? Because once we increase wages, we may attract more workers, and once we attract more workers, those vacancies, if they still exist, will get filled. So if it's out of being funded by vacancy savings, have we capped to take into account those savings, the members that we'll be hiring within the road department?
Supervisor,
Sorry, Steve, I was just going to answer very quickly. Supervisor Moss, no, those positions have not been capped, and we're still proposing to remain at the current employee headcount that exists.
I heard two different things, I think. We're going to maintain the current employee headcount, which means we're going to give them all raises. But if we hire additional employees and increase that employee headcount, that possibility still exists.
That's correct.
Isn't it true that in most departments, though, when we say you can fund it without with vacancy savings, that we say you don't get the positions that you're funding it out of?
If you recall, what template the board approved previously was to be able to identify areas within the existing budget and right-size and downsize and eliminate positions.
Correct.
What I asked for the board to allow us to do in this particular situation, I allowed the board, actual formal board approval, to allow us to take a look at areas that aren't able to provide services because of a lack of employees and do have the funding available, and either through vacancy savings or through alternate fundings, like HERF or like grant funding or whatever, to be able to look at market adjustments for employees. And that's what we're doing here today. So there were two separate programs that the board templates that the board actually approved us to take a look at. One was right sizing, and the other one was where we aren't able to apply or provide adequate servicing because of vacancies in divisions.
What's the size of our road crew right now?
we currently have 75 field and field supervisory positions. We are authorized for 84, and we are maintaining 18% of our overall road maintenance and operations workforce is frozen. And in our FY18 budget, we are not requesting any unfreezing of those 18%.
So with this proposal, this we're getting to where I'm getting at, the additional positions, which we're funding this out of vacancy savings, are still frozen.
Correct.
They're capped, and we're not going to be
18%.
increasing beyond that point.
Correct, and Public Works is not advancing a request in FY18 either for hiring new positions.
Okay.
Chairman Watson?
Supervisor Bishop.
I just wanted to make a comment that most of my citizen-generated complaints are relating to the condition of the roads, and our roads are directly related to operator training and retention, and when we hire in new employees, they have to get a commercial driver's license, and they have to learn how to operate this equipment, and the only way they can do that is on our county roads. So I think it's imperative that we be able to not only recruit and hire, but we need to retain these employees so that once they get the expertise and the experience to maintain our roads, that we can keep these employees. And I think during the budget process that I'll also be mentioning that we need to be looking at some kind of a way to increase pay of those needing an increase throughout the county. But I think this is a good start. I think if we do little pieces of improvements here and there when we are able to do a wage compensation study, it won't be such a shock because we'll have already brought some of our departments up. So I will be voting yes on this. Thank you.
Ms. Flotowski, I would just like to thank you very much for getting this addressed as soon as you did. It was a high priority for me to solve this problem. And I'd like to thank you for getting it here to us as fast as you possibly could. Thank you.
Thank you, and our appreciation lies with the board for their consideration.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman Watson, I'll make a motion that we approve item number 48.
Motion and a second for the approval of item number 48. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 49, discussion, possible action, approve the assignment of right-of-way on the 9th Street, Lake Havasu Road to Edgemont Road in the Dolan Springs area of Arizona, as defined in AZ 036789 for the purpose of right-of-way across federal land in section 10, 25 north, 19 west, for a 69-foot wide by 5,280-foot long strip of land which contains 8.4 acres more or less, and authorize the chairman of the board of supervisors to sign as authorized agent for Federal Form 2800-14 for the acceptance of terms and conditions. Any questions for Mr. Latowski on item number 49?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 49 of the agenda.
We have a motion. And a second. Any further question? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 50. And finally, we get to Cindy Landia Cops, Mojave County Treasurer. Discussion, possible action, accept a donation of space from Lake Havasu City for the period of April 25, 2017 through May 1st, 2017, and approve Mojave County's receipt of value of this gift. Ms. Cox.
Chairman, board, staff.
Thank you for your patience today. It's been a long day.
No worries. Thank you for hearing my item. We had 11th hour opportunity to have our Lake Havasu satellite operations temporary last fall. It happened the Wednesday before we were collecting taxes on Monday. So I didn't have a chance to bring it to the board, and it was missed, obviously, because April 25th already happened. But Charlie Casson, the city manager in Lake Havasu City, has afforded us an area in their city complex for us to collect taxes and hold other treasury options, and we intend to continue to do that because they are not charging us anything. And we have all the controls. Risk management has been through there. They actually are extremely diligent about controls and video surveillance and things like that. So we feel that we have an adequate place, a place where citizens go into anyway. And with Mojave Electric Co-op, now we have 2 places to hold, have a place for satellite operations to happen twice a year for us to collect taxes and help our constituents in the areas that are very populated.
Thank you, Ms. Cox.
Thank you.
I have questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Supervisor Johnson.
I see no IGA attached here.
That is correct.
Well, I mean, last-minute things are well and good, but the board has to approve, you know, agreements like this, and I don't see anything in front of us to approve. What are we approving, your press release today?
It actually is just a kind of consent that you understand that we have an agreement with them. The agreement is verbal, and according to the county attorney, that's all we need. Because we're
Really?
utilizing a desk that wasn't being used. They are not involved in it. We bring our computers, we bring our systems, we bring our safes. Everything is transported through Loomis. Everything, paperwork is brought to us every single day at the end of the day.
And so risk
So we don't
management-
utilize their services other than the front desk.
Risk management went down there and said all your security issues that you have were okay?
Yes.
but risk management didn't bother to think that maybe the county had to approve this lease option or use of the building?
We don't have an IGA for Bullhead Cooperative either. I was advised that is not a necessary item unless we're utilizing their services in terms of using their safe, in terms of them touching our money, in terms of them being involved in our business, talking to our constituents about our issues.
It was brought before the board for, was it MEC? You brought that before the board?
I did,
Yeah. Yeah.
without an IGA, just a
Well,
consent.
you brought an agreement forward that said they would, when the board voted on it.
There was an agreement,
But it was brought before the board so that we
just
had,
exactly like this is.
so the risk management and the attorney is saying we don't need a agreement of any kind to move our people to another location and have, what if something happens there? I'm not worried about the money, I'm just worried about liability issues.
Certainly, I won't speak for risk. I'll speak from the county attorney. I won't speak on behalf of risk. I'll let Byron speak on behalf of risk. But in terms of the county attorney, it'd be nice to have an agreement, always have an agreement. But sometimes if somebody's allowing you to use space, you just say, okay, let's take advantage of it and go ahead and use it. I would love to always have agreements for everything, but sometimes you give a handshake and say, here you go, this is, why don't you go ahead and do it and go forward. I don't see any objection to this either, given that if they're allowing it for a very short window, a period of time to say, yeah, go ahead and use this building, as long as the clerk has their procedures in place and they do their procedures and follow through, then it shouldn't be a problem. Could something happen? Absolutely, and a contract would help assist that. But given this short period of time and a very small window, this seems like a good handshake agreement. Go ahead and allow it and move forward and be done with it.
This was also
Thank you, Mr.
just for edification. I don't know how better to say this, but I begged, and I did not want to stick an agreement in front of his face after I begged, and he finally said yes.
So we're looking for ratification of your action.
Correct.
Thank you, Ms. Goff.
Thank you.
I guess the problem I have is, it's not with, using Havasu. I just think that we need something in front of us. This is the 21st century, and when we're doing something special with another government or anybody, we should have something in front of us.
I would agree that if at all possible, that we should have some type of agreement.
I mean, because today I don't even see anything from the city in here that, that, and I'm not sure what we're ratifying.
If I could, Mr. Chairman? My take on it is, I'm trying to follow along with Cindy and our county attorney is saying, is it's a gift, it's costing us nothing.
Right.
And that's being because of the short time frame, there's no agreement, because if they throw us out tomorrow or the day before yesterday, we haven't lost anything because it was zero to begin with. 0 minus 0 is still 0. And so there's really nothing we're losing if they change the deal. We just pick up and we leave, is my understanding. That's why there's essentially no risk.
So, and I believe the treasurer is just trying to accept the donation and
Right.
Chairman Watson?
Supervisor Bishop.
Based on the information that we have here, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the donation of space from Lake Havasu City graciously for the period ending May 1st, 2017, and approve the Mojave County's receipt of value of this gift.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye.
And
Thank you.
Proceeds 4-1. Thank you. Item number 51, discussion, possible action, authorize the expenditure of funds to cover the cost of an appraisal for Assessors number 303-12-069B. Site address is 112 8th Street, property also known as the former Records Management Office of 802 East Beale Street, Kingman, Arizona, and authorize the contingency fund transfer to the general administration budget of 100-01-0500 and direct staff upon receipt of the final appraisal to bring it back to the board for direction on moving forward with a public auction. Pretty self-explanatory.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 51 of the agenda.
We have a motion for approval of 51.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 52A, discussion, possible action regarding the reconsideration of item number 32 from the April 17th, 2017 board agenda. And that was the approval of the updated Mojave County Treasurer's investment policy. And I put this on the agenda for reconsideration.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 52B, discussion, possible action, that would be to refer the Mojave County Treasurer's investment policy for review and recommendation and input from the county's attorney's office and staff.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve item 52B.
We have a motion for the approval of 52B. Certainly. Come on up, Ms. Cox. I'll second the motion. 52B.
I just wanted to revisit this myself. I had done a couple of steps that obviously needed to be vetted through the supervisors. I apologize for not bringing this to you before. It went through the consent agenda, so I wasn't able to talk about it. The first thing is that the policy was greatly simplified, and that's a good thing, because one of the things that we had talked about was expanding the possibility of investments under Title 35, and that would be a decision that I would make with the board, not independently. It contains the key elements, which is to follow the Arizona State Revised Statutes, Title 55, specifically, but not only for 35-323. We wanted to define the current path, which is government and government GSEs, bonds, adequate internal controls, separate, also examined by the AZ General Auditor of the state 3 years in a row, who have looked at our investment policy and looked at our new policy. The investment officer, who is my chief deputy, who will be leaving on Friday, and my new chief deputy will be Randy Vanderplatz, and inform the board of any proposed changes of any of the things I just said. One of the things that you should know about is that the advisory board, when we asked to dissolve the investment advisory committee as it was, I put together an investment advisory committee within my office, and that includes myself, Julia Dollarhide, my management analyst, Wade Stevens, my accountant, Luke Mornian, who is the new CPA that we hired, who also has an extensive background in internal controls, Randy Vanderplatz, who's been with the office for 30 years, and just some stuff that you should know is that so far, we had a really intensive, successive planning with Bill Barker. Bill comes from a CPA background. He's worked in investments or in the private sector for years, many years. We made sure that, one, he did training every Thursday with the entire staff that I spoke of. And we also brought in Bob Moore, who is the owner of an Institutional Capital Management, who did a 2-day training specifically to investments. Paulina Wu, who is our PFM advisory company that we're contracted with, she's the director, and she did a 1-day training, and I would be happy to send you those, but the first one is 126 pages of PowerPoint. And then also in my new initiatives, in my training, I don't know if it was a new initiative or just the increase of the training budget, was to have 2 people on that team certified government investment specialists by the Government Investment Officers Association, GIOA. So those are some of the things that I have planned, and that those were pretty inexpensive, all of them combined. The last thing that I wanted to say is I received an email from, well, I have 2 changes that I made to the original form that I had put with this agenda item. The first change if you can look at your number 3, general objectives under credit risk, we changed that to read, instead of types of securities listed in section 6 of this investment policy, to read types of securities defined by Arizona Revised Statutes, including but not limited to Title 35. We wanted to make sure that we were very inclusive with that. And the second thing was 10, which had said every 4 years, the investment policy should be revisited and brought to the board. And on request, I changed that to annually, and took out the wording that said and or upon changes, and put and upon any changes being made to the policy. So I do have changes made here. Do you want me to give those to Ginny?
That'd be great.
And then I have one more thing. If I can get there, apologize. Okay. An email from Paulina Wu sent last week that said I have reviewed. Paulina Wu is the director of PFM, who is our advisory, management advisory committee. Thank you. I reviewed the proposed policy. It is well written and compliant with applicable state statutes. There are a couple of places that I have annotated with recommendations for additional language, mostly in reference to the application of the policy when using an investment advisor. These are not material changes. Then the only thing that she goes on to say is Section V3, internal controls, currently requires that the details of internal control systems shall be documented in an investment procedures manual and shall be reviewed and updated annually. The procedures and guidelines we discussed are generally included in the reference internal controls documentation and not the investment policy. The policy should provide the structure and governance for the program, but avoid the inclusion of very specific procedural details. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that it had been through them. I also sent it to Lenore Knudsen, my civil deputy attorney. Unfortunately, she's been ill, so she hasn't gotten back to me, but I don't have an issue at all of it going through legal. I don't have a problem with that at all. I do take issue with the fact that it would go through anyone other than legal because of the specialty. I would think that PFM, our investment advisor who does it for free and who also writes policies, should know how an investment policy should be written, and legal should tell you whether or not it has all the applicable laws. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried unanimously for the review, recommendation, and input from the county attorney's office and staff for the Mojave County Treasurer's investment policy. Item number 53, discussion, possible action, review the available funding proposals and address our economic issues, continued by the board at the April 17th meeting. And I'm hoping that each one of the supervisors today can talk about some ideas, some priorities, get our budgetary process kicked off, looked at, and understand the parameters of which we now operate are further weighted by our responsibilities to the pension funds and other outside influences. So with that, Supervisor Jean Bishop has proposed her policies on a written form. Jean, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Chairman Watson. I think we're heading into some really difficult financial decisions, and you've asked us to all put our ideas together as to what we think are the most critical and kind of prioritize those and come up with some funding sources. So I did that. I came up with about 10 issues that I think are critical, and they're listed in my document in chronologically, in my opinion. And number one is the Mojave County water issues and hiring legal counsel, and I think we should go forward with anything and everything possible to keep Mojave County safe with our water. And I know those are limited, and that's why we need legal counsel to help us with this, because right now the state of Arizona has control of Mojave County water, and so that's my number one concern. And then my number two concern I listed as our law enforcement, as well as our other employee retention. So I hope to visit that during the budget process. And next on my list is a 2.5% step increase for employees, and that may not come in this budget process, but it depends on what we decide to do as far as revenue. If we come up with a revenue source, then I absolutely want the employees that haven't already been compensated for their work to receive at least a token appreciation of their work, and hopefully we can retain our employees if we can do something for them to show them that we're working toward that wage compensation study in the future. And then next is road maintenance and our infrastructure preservation. So what I'd like the folks to know is that the more we put off road maintenance, the more it's going to cost us in the future. So, you know, according to Steve Lukowski, I think he said that a road improvement or maintenance that costs us $1 now in years to come will cost us $5, $7 more. So we can put it off, but it's not going to help our situation as far as our finances or the condition of our roads. And believe me, people are more concerned about roads than I think they are anything else in my district anyway. And then y'all saw the presentation from our pension. We've got some serious issues to budget for in the coming years on that and other unfunded liabilities. And then the courthouse project, of course, that's moving forward, and it's not fully funded, but I'm sure that Chuck Gertler will help us find funding for that as this progresses. if we don't find the funding for that, the courthouse will proceed. Maybe the remodel of the historical courthouse may have to be put on the back burner, and the remodel of the Justice Court, which will go into the now Superior Court, may go on the back burner. But I think we can find within our budget to build the courthouse, and I think it's needed, and it's going to be great for all of Mojave County. And then I have the code enforcement program. This is a new program that we have not discussed yet openly in a public meeting, but it's an idea of combining planning and zoning, development services, code enforcement, environmental health, and erase, and kind of putting them all into a new program, which would require some new employees, some additional employees. But I think if we don't get a handle of code enforcement in Mojave County, specifically trash in our deserts, that it's only going to get worse. And I would certainly support this new code enforcement program if we could find the funding. And right now, the funding is an unknown, so that's one of my wish list items. The library, we took 10 cents away from the library last year, kind of moved things around so that we didn't have to raise your property taxes. Well, you know, that was a Band-Aid fix for last year, but it needs to be put back, or at least a portion of it needs to be put back. The animal shelter, we have a study ongoing now that we'll make recommendations soon to the board. It's something in the next few years we definitely need to address, and maybe there's grants out there depending on what we decide to do with that. And of course, further down the road, I just wanted to mention these. I haven't forgotten that the sheriff needs his substations. We need a morgue. We're now working out of a 10 building, I understand, and Mojave County Fairgrounds is still something that Mojave County needs to consider. And if we can help the fairgrounds, good. If we have to take the fairgrounds back in future years, we need to at least keep that in mind. And those, Chairman Watson, are my priorities. And I don't know if you want me to go into the revenue sources now or move this along to everybody else.
I think we, on this issue, we just kind of like to list our priorities. So at that point, thank you very much for your input, Supervisor Bishop.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Johnson, could you care to list your priorities, or?
I have no new initiatives at all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Pardon me?
I have no new initiatives at all. I don't want to
new
add
ones?
to the debt.
Okay.
No.
Supervisor Angus?
Well, I think Supervisor Bishop did a good job of identifying all our problems. I might not have the same priority numbers. I think our sheriff's department and our roads are probably the top two for me, but you specifically asked for available funding proposals, and since I have none, I'm going to move it along. I don't have any. Again, we're at the beginning. I'm waiting for our workshop. I want to see the entirety of it. I want to see what we could cut before we talk about what we could ask for from our citizens. So that's where I stand right now.
Very good. Thank you. Supervisor Moss?
Yes, thank you. I'd agree with Supervisor Bishop in that it was a very good recitation of the universality of our problems. I think I would distinguish in that I don't think we can solve all problems in one budget year. And some of those problems, I think we need to wait until everything improves economically before we can actually engage with. I personally see 6 problems that we need to engage with, and I would call 3 of them more important than the other 3, but they're all 3 important. When it comes to roads, is Mr. Latosky here? Maybe he can, because I'll tell you what my data points are, and I want to make sure that he agrees with me so we're on the same page.
Road is your number 1 issue?
Roads and law enforcement would be my number 1 issues. I would say my complaints, which are numerous, are 50-50 on each. Mr. Latosky, I have that HERF is roughly $12 million a year. Our vehicle license tax is roughly $3.5 million a year. And so total revenue for road maintenance is 15.5, give or take. Is that accurate?
Supervisor Moss, yes, that's accurate.
And I also have that between our paved and unpaved roads, we have an annual maintenance need between 24 and 25 million a year. Is that also accurate?
As far as Amos, that is accurate.
And when I say these numbers, I'm not holding you to an exact figure. These are about, because I understand things vary every now and then.
Exactly, and the expenses represent optimal maintenance.
Sure. And then we have, doing the math, that means we have an $8 to $9 million shortfall every year around that figure. Is that correct?
As far as Amos, correct.
Then I have as a data point that every dollar of maintenance we ignore eventually becomes between $4 and $10 of maintenance, or not maintenance, $4 to $10 to repair, and I usually sum that up in shorthand as around $7 for every dollar we don't adequately maintain. Is that correct?
As far as Amos, yes, in general, the literature on road maintenance activities characterize exactly as you have stated, the deferred cost of deferred maintenance.
Right. Then finally, and I did not include this in my written summary because I was trying to keep it as short as I could, but that roughly 45% of Mojave County roads are approaching failure imminently, and that 55% will have that same issue within 1 through 10 years. Would that be an accurate summation?
Now, Supervisor Moss, that's speaking to an engineering analysis that I personally authored and have been carrying out over the last few years, so that is absolutely correct.
I read your report, which is why I'm asking you to make sure that we got it right.
Yes, but that one comes from me personally.
Good. I say that because we may have to speak on these issues publicly, because I don't think the public may realize, for example, that $8 to $9 million of deferred maintenance will eventually transfer into, give or take, $56 million in debt down the road as we try to rebuild as opposed to maintain. And since the Board of Supervisors can't impose a sales tax, my understandings of the statute is that the voters have to oppose that sales tax. And so my recommendation on our road issues, in consideration of those data points, is that we take a 1/2 cent, 0.005, if my math holds up, my decimal system holds up, that we take that to the voters and let the voters decide with those data points in mind, because I do get a lot of complaints on the roads, and we cannot, as a board or as a county, fix all the roads. In fact, we're in something like a Vietnam MASH unit where we're triaging our patients in order to keep things afloat. And eventually, when you do that, they begin to die. And that's going to happen. So the voters have to make a decision, or the state legislature has to make a decision, but this board cannot make a decision except to try to educate both our legislature and our voters on these issues. I'd also like to make clear that even if we got all our HERF dollars back, that only reduces the $8 to $9 million shortfall by roughly $500,000 to $1 million. So we still have that significant shortfall every year. So that's my concern about the roads, and that's my proposed funding sources. The board can do nothing except educate people and refer these issues to resolution to both the legislature. I believe there was a ballot proposal being contemplated this year in the legislature. We didn't go anywhere. Or take it to our own voters and say, Phoenix as an entirety, we have friends, our legislators are very good, is not necessarily our friend. Maybe we need to take our own destiny in our own hands and solve our own problems. Now, Mr. Letowski, I just wanted to get those data points. I don't want to keep you standing. It's my opinion that if we were to take this matter to the voters, considering how these elections have gone in recent past in Bullhead City and elsewhere, that if it's just impose a sales tax, they're going to say no. They don't trust government, and that could be based upon other things. So, generally, if we were to refer a ballot measure to reassure voters that they can trust us, that these dollars will be going into the roads, I would suggest that we have a sunset provision. We can debate that terminology. By statute, I think it has to go in 20 years anyway. So is it 1 year? Is it 20 years? Is it somewhere in between? It can only be used for roads, not buildings. This is one of the constant complaints I get, is that we took road dollars and we put them into buildings. Not this board, it was a prior board that did it. But that we assure them, no, it'll go for direct maintenance of the roads. Secondly, it cannot be used to increase the size of government. We have to realize we're deep red Arizona. No one's going to want to hear that we're going to make the county government bigger. They don't like that. So that will say, fine, we'll put the money out that we raise from this tax to private contractors to do this. So we're not hiring new road crews, et cetera. And finally, each of the 5 supervisor districts get an equal division of monies, including each supervisor within the district working with the cities to figure out a fair IGA. And that's to reassure the voters that if they vote for it, their particular district is not going to be shortchanged. They know they're going to get by vote, they're going to get the equal share of the pie. If we do that, there's a possibility, I think, they may approve this. And that could be part of the ballot proposal. And then we will have done everything we can to solve our road problems. Now, I don't think we can solve them entirely with this proposal, but that's the maximum we're allowed to do by law. And so until the state law changes, this is all we can do. And so that's my proposal on roads. My other issue is law enforcement. Whether it's sheriff deputies, whether it's jail guards, whether it's probation, in my opinion, law enforcement is in desperate straits. I believe from the sheriff, and if I say anything that's mistaken, if Sheriff Schuster's out there, he can throw a rock at me. I think I saw him earlier. There he is. But that we need 120 deputies. We can't get 120 deputies, but maybe we can get to 105. And when it comes to law enforcement, the only way I see around that is the sales tax right now, which could be imposed by the board. But we would have to, just like we did with the quarter-cent sales tax in 2000, we'd have to earmark that for law enforcement. When it comes to the pension debt, we have $37 million in pension debt, and I think it's actually 38 when she's finishing rounding the numbers. I think Coral told me 37 to 39, so 38 might be a good number to say. And if I hear the presentation correctly, the longer we put off repayment, the more interest and things like that we're going to pay, because they're going to put us on a mortgage payment plan. And as my grandfather, the plumber, once told me, who was the wisest man I ever knew, interest is for suckers. And if you do the math on $38 million, the interest that we'll be paying would slowly chew up a significant portion of our budget. So why not figure out a system to pay it down faster, as fast as we can? Now, I would take the advice of experts, and this is not in my proposal, but that we dedicate a certain percentage directly to pay off PSPRS as fast as we can, because apparently there's lots of benefits for doing that, and that we create a segregated account that we pay nothing to, but we create the funding source so that we have a fund balance, and when they finally figure out the rules and they finally figure out what Mojave County's share is, we can write a check and not necessarily have to pay interest and not necessarily have to burden some future board. But I think pension has to be a very high priority. And again, sales tax might be a good reason for that. And the reason I say sales tax for these two things is, and a couple others I'll get to in a moment, is my understanding is that the cities say 25% of our sales tax comes from tourists and out visitors. Our county finance director says 60%. I don't know if it's 25%, 60%, or somewhere in between. I'd like the two of them get together and work it out so that we have a general idea what the accurate number is. But I don't care. If it's 25%, at least it's 25% subsidized from out-of-town visitors, and they use our law enforcement. They use our roads. So they use these things, so maybe they should pay for these things when they're going from point A to point B. Yeah, I saw that. Thank you, Chairman Watson. So the pension debt's another one. I agree with Supervisor Angus, not Angus, I'm sorry, though she did agree with her, just maybe not the same priorities, that our animal shelter needs to be addressed with. We have a report coming soon. And my idea there is if we have a sales tax, we can build the animal shelter, hopefully from some fund use balance, and then pay that back with any sales tax that we're generating so we can get the animal shelter taken care of, get it out of our hair. It's been something that's been pestering us now for 4 years, and there's a legitimate need there. And I also agree with that sales tax that we should deal with water issues. I wouldn't just say for litigation, but also augmentation, conservation, lobbying, because there's a statement that I think that Supervisor Bishop said that the state of Arizona controls us, and that's actually, I don't think, 100% true legally. Nobody controls the water in the rural areas unless there's an INA or and AWR has refused to do that under their standards. I've read their standards and I understand they're applying their standards appropriately. But until the law changes and we get the same protections that Maricopa and Pinal and Pima County have, until we get some sort of protection, like monitoring, and able to control our destiny in water when it comes to our aquifers and make sure they're safeguarded. We have to do lots of things, and that's augmentation, that's conservation, that's lobbying our legislature. Hiring a lobbyist is, I hate to say those words, makes my mouth feel bad, but on the water issues, we may have to do that. And litigating, we've already done it once, I'm sure we'll have to do it again someday soon, or not so soon, I hope. Those are my sales tax issues. I have the more details wound up there. That's something the board could, if we wanted to, take care of it. There's one thing that was said, though, in Supervisor Bishop's comment. I can't justify, in my mind, in my heart, in my conscience, a universal pay increase for county employees. Because if the private sector is not enjoying a universal increase in their standard of living, how can we tell everyone we're going to tax that we're going to take from them and lower their standard of living to improve government employees' standard of living? And I don't want to knock our county employees because they do a really good job, but it comes down to the time where we can't solve all problems. And we need to focus on the most important things. And in my mind, the most important things are the sheriff, or law enforcement, our road systems, those are core critical government functions, and paying our debts. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. When it finally the same issue, so I agree with you there's a problem. I don't think it's a problem we should try to solve this year. We should continue to use the own system of work within your existing budget because we've been making some steady progress there. And I understand we have cut those budgets and we're down to, 900 employees out of 1,200, so we've lost 25% of our workforce, and we've been making some strides there within the current system. And finally, the library shortfalls. In my mind, the board discovered there was excess there, and that was a good thing. They decreased the tax rate to keep in mind that excess. That excess is gone now. We've used up those savings. And so we have to restore the library property tax to where it was before. We gave the taxpayers a break for 2 years because it was within the budget, which was within the revenue stream that existed. That does no longer exist, so we have to readjust. So those are my thoughts, and that's what I'm throwing out there for consideration to the administration, the board, the various elected officials that are out there. And I, too, have faith that the courthouse will be brought into budget by the judiciary and county staff, because I've seen via some things flying around that they're making great progress, and they're still meeting on that. So I will stop my comments, because I've taken roughly 15 minutes, I think, and I apologize.
Well, there's no need for an apology. Thank you very much for your outline. I appreciate it. And I think I'm in agreement with most everyone myself. My number one priority is to take a good, hard, long look at law enforcement issues with the sheriff and the sheriff's department. And with that, the pension debt that we have not only for PRPS, but also the pension debt that we have for elected officials. So that's my number one. My number two priority are the roads. And if it would be a wise idea to refer it to the voters, then so be it, and let them make a decision. Every year that we don't act on working with our roads puts us years and years down the pike. There's just no way right now that we can really foreseeably catch up without a huge effort. And for right now, number three is the library in Kingman. To get that back to the funding level it was 2 years ago. We have used up those funds. I think it'd be unfair for the Kingman library to be not expanded or improved while the other libraries in the system are solvent. So those are three of probably five of my top considerations. I think we ought to continue to look at the animal shelter, the sheriff's substation, and the morgue as a very high priority. I don't know that it's number 4, but somewhere slipping in between 1 and 3. We've got to look long-term at this animal shelter problem, and one of these days I think that morgue issue will just jump up and bite us if we're not careful. And with that, I think we've already gone through a number of the ideas on funding issues, so there's probably no sense in continuing our discussion on the quarter-cent sales tax or other funding issues. Unless Ms. Lloyd has something to add. Ms. Lloyd, do you have anything that you'd like to add today?
I don't really, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the time, for the few minutes. I don't really have anything in particular to add. It's important just that we have a general dialogue, if you will, and regarding the comment on what percentage is coming of sales tax, if that's an option, what is paid by our local residents, and the percentage that is paid by other. For the sake of the chart depiction, we are estimating that about 40% of the revenues from local residents, and that the balance is from other, including visitors, travelers, tourism, and business to business. I did have conversations. I actually called and left a message with Bullhead City Manager Toby Cotter to discuss that. But I believe that our number in the county is a little bit higher than Bullhead's because we have other areas that we receive particular tax that Bullhead City would not be able to enjoy that. So I actually have some technical references affiliated with the Grand Canyon West Tourism study that was provided. I received information on Lake Havasu City from the Arizona Office of Tourism, and I spoke with the Arizona Office of Tourism, so we can iron those out. The bottom line that their mathematical estimates, again, if we pick any number, if we pick a 50% number, if we pick a 40% number, again, the point being that it is shared by others. And it's generally, the sales tax is generally widely supported by residents, if you will, because they're able to pick and choose where they purchase their items, and they know what they can afford and what they're unable to versus the property tax. So we look forward to any other comments that you may have and any other direction that you send us on. Otherwise, we will be meeting with all of you in a couple of weeks.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Lloyd?
I have a question.
Certainly.
You throw around this visitors paying for more of it than our local residents. How many out-of-state people own properties in Mojave County?
The assessor's office, and I actually spoke about that, and they said that it's quite an effort, essentially, to get through that calculation, because they'd have to go through all of the physical addresses, all of the mailing addresses, and then come up with the calculation. So they said that they probably could, but it still was going to be an estimate, because there are some people who are residents of Arizona, residents of Mojave County, that have alternate addresses during the winter if they're residents here and they're somewhere else at the time. So again, that's an estimate as well. On the actual, they were able to provide the actual breakdown between residential assessment and all the other, that would be commercial, governmental, everything else. And for that factor, it was the opposite, where 60% of the assessed value is residential and 40% is commercial. So that's just of the value.
Okay.
Mr. Hendricks?
Just, Mr. Chairman, just a couple points of clarification for Coral and on a excise tax that can be used for general county purposes, that has to be unanimous vote of the board. We all know that. On a transportation tax that goes to the vote of the people, I'm sorry, the excise tax can't, for general county purposes, has to be decided by the Board of Supervisors and can't go to the vote of the people. And I know you all understand that. On a transportation tax, that would go to the vote of the people. Would that take a unanimous vote or a majority?
I don't know. Both Supervisor Moss and I looked at the statutes actually on that, and I didn't see anywhere where it specified whether it was a majority, a supermajority, or a unanimous. So we would need to get a legal
So
opinion on.
we'll try to get that clarified for the board. And the third point I wanted to make is that the board may want to direct staff to take a look at the statutes regarding the transportation excise tax, because it's my understanding, at least currently, if we go through the effort of taking the tax to the vote of the people, then that money goes to a planning or a COG, a separate governmental agency that would represent. And Supervisor Moss made an excellent point that it would be collected throughout our county, and it probably should be shared throughout our county.
If I could, there's actually, I'll leave this to Ryan to look at and confirm. So I'm not, my lawyer hat's not on. This is just Steve Moss, citizen speaking. There's two statutes back to back. One ends in 6, the other ends in 7. And the 7, the second one would allow the money to come to the county. And this first one would require us to create a regional transportation authority. Right. And there'd be a board, and we'd appoint members, and the cities would appoint members. I don't really care which one we do. I think that the last one has less administration, and so less administration means more cost into our road systems, but I'll let the county attorney figure that out.
Great.
It's 426106 and 426107.
Chairman Watson, I have a question for Supervisor Moss. In his ideal of the transportation tax, he says all monies raised must go out to private contractors. Yes. Wouldn't it be prudent to put may instead of must, in case the county can do that work cheaper than putting it out to private contractors?
No. The reason why is we're trying to convince voters, not trying to convince us. And it's my perspective in my ideal world, if we wanted the voters to consider this seriously, they're not going to want to give more money to the county for administration, for employees. They want their roads fixed. And the perception is, correctly or incorrectly, that the private sector is more efficient than the government. And if they know that we are going to be using the procurement laws of the state of Arizona, it's going to go out to bid and it's going to private contractors, I think they would be more likely to vote for this, as opposed to thinking that we're going to double the size of the road department, where we have a maximum repair. We can't build, we can maintain, and we have a maximum of we can do for what, $200,000 and some $200,000, something like that, as opposed, and everyone's looking at roads, and it, I can look at a dozen roads and tell you right now they need like $1 million worth of work each. So it's I'm trying to take off my supervisor hat. I'm trying to take off all the hats and think of it as a voter on the street. And I think the voter on the street wants their road fixed, and they want assurances that their road is going to get fixed, or that maximize the possibility. And if they think it's going to go into the maw of government and disappear someplace, I don't think they're going to like that thought. That's why I put that in there. And I spent like a month and a half, 2 months thinking about this. So, and obviously, it's the pleasure of the majority of the board. This is what my thought was when it came to, if we refer it to the people, what they're going to be looking for.
Thank you, Supervisor. I think that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to discuss on item 53. I believe Judge Gertler may have a comment that he wanted to make on sales tax. I'm not sure if they wanted to inject that at this point or not.
Thank you, Chairman Watson. I think the board today really has called a spade a spade. I mean, you've heard the issues with respect to the, pensions, the retirement problems and things of that nature. We have no dedicated income source for that liability. It's as simple as that. We have limited income sources, revenue sources for construction projects. It's going to sunset in December of 2019. And yet we have a laundry list of very worthy causes. And I'm not just talking the courthouse. I mean, obviously you've referenced it today with respect to an animal shelter, with respect to a morgue, with respect to sheriff substations. We have no dedicated income or revenue source with respect to keeping law enforcement. And I do not include just the sheriff's office in that. I include that with respect to probation. And all of you are very aware of the issues that we've had with probation. We referenced it earlier this morning with detention being significantly understaffed. Our POs in the field are significantly understaffed, and they're significantly underpaid. You know, the county can continue to go on the road it's going. We can limit our services to the citizens of Mojave County. The divisions and the department heads do not have the ability to step forward and provide services unless the board acts. And I understand that there has been a great deal of how to put it, recalcitrance with respect to looking at the sales tax. However, folks, we're talking a 1/4-cent sales tax. And I think an analogy or an example is very pertinent. You know, I was driving back from Kingman to Bullhead one afternoon. I pulled into the Maverick station to get a Diet Coke. There was a gentleman in front of me. He had a 12-pack of beer. It cost $12. By the time the tax was added to that, he found himself 3 cents short. The Maverick store had a penny bin. The Maverick store gave him the 3 cents so he could purchase that 12-pack of beer. Folks, the 1/4-cent sales tax that Mojave County has on the sale of a 12-pack of beer is 3 cents. It's 3 cents. I don't think that the Southern Californian that's coming into Lake Havasu City with their $35,000 boat is going to turn around and not buy that 12-pack of beer at a Circle K or Commander Liquor because it's going to cost them 3 cents to Mojave County. I just don't see that happening. They're still going to buy that 12-pack of beer and contribute 3 cents. So if you're truly looking at trying to take care of issues, and again, the roads are separate and distinct. You know, that will have to go to a vote to the people. But if you're really truly looking at trying to address your public safety issues, if you're looking at trying to address your long-term debt with respect to the pensions, if you're looking at trying to handle the capital construction issues, the 1/4-cent sales tax on the capital projects, even for 5 years, will get you every single one of your buildings on your wish list completed. And you would still have money left over for maintenance of buildings. 5-year continuation of the 1/4-cent sales tax would do that. The 1/4-cent sales tax, whether the board deems it 5, 10, or 20 years to address the ongoing liability with respect to the pensions and some of these other issues. Folks, that's 6 cents for that 12-pack of beer instead of 3 cents. And I would submit to you, the average person out on the street isn't going to balk at buying that 12-pack of beer because they just contributed 6 cents to Mojave County.
Thank you, Judge Gertler. On to item number 54. Supervisor Angus.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Watson. I put this on the agenda. It came to my attention in the middle of last week, that there were some ice machines that were put into the Development Services building, upstairs and downstairs, at the cost of about $3,500 each, with the stand, maybe $4,000 each. And it came to me kind of anonymously, and what that told me was, people are watching, and as we talk about all of this and how much we don't have money, it was concerning to me that these ice machines were put in for, I don't own an ice machine. They're pretty pricey. And so I asked Mike Hendricks if he knew about it, and he said he didn't. And then I learned that all the departments, I know we have credit cards, we got procurement cards for the public, and that's one of the reasons I put this on. I want to know how many of these cards are out there, and I was even more surprised to learn that they can go up to $5,000 each without being signed off on, without being, no oversight, no authority by either the county manager or whomever. And so I asked to see all the money, all the charges that come on these cards. And so what happened at Development Services was they charged them to two different departments, because $7,000 would be above that $5,000 threshold. So it was concerning to me enough that I wanted the board to talk about it. Maybe $5,000 is a bit much for department heads to have total authority over. Again, up to the board. I wanted to see everything. And I have, it's a lot. It's a lot of paper. It's a lot of spreadsheets. And I'm still looking at it, and I hope the rest of the board is. I might be late to the game. Maybe everyone else knew about it. I didn't. So I wanted to put it out there as we begin the budget process again. We got to be careful. We cannot go and ask people who work very, very hard for even 6 more cents on a package of beer if we're spending $7,000 on ice machines. And I'm just going to be honest about that. I was very concerned and upset when I heard about that. So concerned enough that's why I put it on the agenda. So I'd like to hear from the other supervisors what they think.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, we did this a long time ago over the raising the limit of what people could use, and I think it's because things cost so much now. What you're questioning probably sounds like an excellent question to be brought up, but I think that's where I don't know that I'd want to go back down, because then it kind of slows the process of a lot of things people have to buy, but that's where we have the county administrator and finance, because when you submit those, somebody's supposed to say what budget line item are you putting it to? Do you have that appropriated there? You're not, because somebody usually snitches you off if you're if you're doing something wrong, like the anonymous you got. I'm not saying that was wrong or anything, just saying that it brings it up, but to remind people to look at these things is always a good idea, but I think dropping the limit down would probably crimp a lot of things just because of the cost of stuff anymore.
Well, it was interesting because when I was looking at the spreadsheets, there were a lot of smaller items, and then I was told that we get rebates, which is a great thing for using it. And I know in my office, that's the kinds of things we do. But when I didn't see that many large purchases with it. They seemed, and I think some of them were from grant-funded departments. I just thought now would be the time to talk about it, and here we are.
I'm going to say that I agree with Supervisor Angus's concerns. It's my opinion that county staff has got to focus on the must-have, the needs-to-have, and not the want-to-haves when we're considering some of these things. And so I'll say I'm disappointed in the decision-making of those ice machines, though I understand that we need one in the Public Works building and the other place because we send people out in the 110-degree heat sometimes. But that doesn't mean you get 2 ice machines in a Community Development Services building. So there was an error of judgment there, in my opinion. When it comes to whether we should lower the limit, I think that maybe we should have the county administrator go through those reports, figure out if this is an isolated incident, and then maybe leave it with the slap on the hand, because I reached out to one of the county employees that I have respect for, which is many of them, by the way, but I only had one who responded to my text immediately, and that was John Meading, who you all know. And he expressed the opinion that if you lower the limit, especially with some of the projects he and his guys have to deal with, that you're going to slow down the work they do, because then you have to cut a check, and there's delays in cutting a check, and that there'd be administrative costs, which means that he thought and I'll take this as advisable, that you're going to add many thousands of dollars to the cost of doing business each year, because you're going to have employees up here processing checks and whatnot, as opposed to trusting the Public Works and other guys to do their jobs. He also mentioned that when you have these, that you save money, as opposed to like 2% on purchases, as opposed to saying you have to wait 60 days for a check. There's savings when you can make it quick. I'm not saying I made up my mind on what we need to do with this, but I think it's something that we should refer to the county administrator to look through and give us a report on, because what it comes down to, I really hope out of a $77 million budget, give or take every year, that this was a $1 in $10,000 isolated error of judgment, and that it's rare. I also don't want to overreact and cost the county more money by trying to tighten the screws. Maybe it's necessary. Maybe it is necessary. But I think it's something that we need to look at and measure twice and cut once.
Well, thank you for your comment. I do have a little bit of information that might clarify a few things. Number one is we have about 135 people to go in the field on each of these days possible. I was in the ice business for a number of years and served Mojave County, and it's not unusual for $7,000 a year to be the bill. And when they bought ice machines, then they no longer required the services of Northern Ice. So from time to time, they'll need to replace these machines, but there's a possibility that they are saving dollars in this process. So you may want to look into that and ask some questions and find out and do the inquiry, but this might be a situation that might prove to be in their favor of judgment. And I would also advise many of us to maybe look twice sometimes. And so I just thought I'd throw that out a little bit. But I do know that 135 people go through a lot of ice. And if there are 2 machines in one building, it's very possible that one machine just doesn't have the capacity for 2. They're filling 5-gallon buckets, not lunch boxes. So many of these people. So having been there and experienced that, I thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that,
I want to chime in on this. I just think that if this was bad judgment by one of our own, I don't think we should punish the entire population of Mojave County employees that have these P cards, because number one, finance matches each transaction with invoices received in their department. So there's oversight, and I think the county administrator also has some oversight on that. And I asked the question because I didn't know what this was all about. I just saw it on the agenda and there was no backup material. So I asked Coral, I said, what, are people abusing these cards? And she told me that occasionally there's been a personal purchase on a card that's was accidental, and it has been rectified by the person that did that. And it's very rare. That's only happened a couple times over the years of using this P card. And I said, well, what about restrictions? Do we have restrictions on these cards? And she said, yes, there are restrictions on the card. The bank automatically restricts a lot of different uses, like you can't go and get a cash advance or buy lottery tickets or gamble or things of such nature. So there are restrictions on the card already if anybody's worrying about cash advances or abuses by county employees. But I just think that, you know, if we have to go and get an okay every time we want to make a purchase, that it's going to waste a lot of manpower and time. And I think we need to trust our managers, and they have to live within their budget. So if they want to spend their budget money on something ridiculous, I don't approve of that, but I trust them to make those kind of judgments. So.
Can I?
thank you, Supervisor Bishop. I'd like to make one comment before we adjourn. Trust but verify.
If I could, Mr. Chairman? I think Supervisor Angus made a point earlier that maybe we can get a report from the county manager about how many P cards are out there, have him do a review, and then report back to the board on that, so we can have an idea of what's happening.
Mr. Hendrick?
I guess one thing to go to Supervisor Moss's question, A long time ago, previous board had a problem with credit cards and did away with all of them. And one of the big problems was that our employees aren't too wealthy, so every time they, especially with travel, this is where it really got bad. The reimbursement part, nobody wanted to travel because they couldn't afford the airfare and the hotel room and the food, and then come back and get stuck with it, and so they came back. So they tried doing away without credit cards, and it got to be a real problem.
You know,
Especially for buying stuff too, going through the
Totally
payout.
understand that. My issue wasn't with the credit cards themselves. It was with the threshold of the money that can be spent without prior authorization, that's all.
Sure.
If maybe that is something that the board wanted to look at.
Yeah, just to beat a dead horse, I'm sorry. I can certainly put internal controls, but I think as an organization, we have to trust our directors to a great extent. And I didn't want the board to leave this meeting, or the public to leave watching this meeting, that there was necessarily bad judgment. I think in my conversation with Supervisor Angus, I said I'd look into it, but first, in my conversation with the department, I said, why don't you use, what's the issue? And they said, well, we have a lot of field personnel going out, and we also have, our cold water runs hot, and which is an odd thing. And like Supervisor Moss did, the first thing I did was pick up the phone and call John Meading, because he's our most knowledgeable person. And he went and investigated the Development Services building, and he says we have a true mess out there. We have valves that aren't installed, and we have lines that aren't run correctly, and it's causing our toilets to flush hot water and other issues. So in looking at the entire picture, there was considerable justification for at least moving towards ice machines. And we are working towards fixing Development Services and getting that back to where it's working correctly. But it sounded like a fairly expensive fix to me, and it sounded like it's not going to happen overnight because they've got to chase down all these issues. It seemed like a systemic problem throughout the entire building, which was interesting. And that begs the question: are we going to go talk to the contractor and do other things? But that's another story. In going through the P cards, you know, receipts are collected. They have to be. You have to collect the receipts. You have to designate the funding source. It's looked at by the office supervisor, then it goes to the director to actually approve. Then it goes to finance, and finance actually makes sure everything is getting paid correctly. What I can do is, if there's any question along the lines whatsoever about a purchase, I can put in place a policy that they notify me, so that at least I'm aware of it. If there is a question, and anybody has the ability to do that. And also, absolutely, I'll try to provide a report to the board on how big, what the magnitude of our use on P cards are, so that you all can take a look at that, and I'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Pretty close. Okay, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry. Ms. Scott?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Becky O'Brien, our director, probably knows better than I do, but I was told when I got here that the reason why the $5,000 limit was imposed is because that's the maximum that you, as a director, have the right to not go through procurement and get 3 bids and decide on our own, so we're able to make those kind of contracts through the P card and get the discount as well. Is that your understanding as well?
That's correct. $5,000 is a small dollar limit. Now, you will see purchases above $5,000 P card, but they've gone through the process of requesting a limit. They've demonstrated how the purchases for is validated that they have the correct documentation. And then we work with finance to get a short-term limit in place that as soon as the purchase is done, it's moved back to the $5,000 limit.
I just wanted to mention why the limit was 5,000, because it sounded like that was something that was unaware. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goff.
Are we adjourned?
We're adjourned. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.